Welcome back to Celluloid Dreams, a psychology film. And I'm Mike, of course.
And I'm Matt. Hello.
And we've been going through our favorite films, not the best of all time necessarily. Some of them are, but our favorites, like it or not, just so you can get to know our tastes. And we have gotten three-quarters of the way through the list. So for those who are just now catching up to us, I thought maybe we should start off by just giving you a sense of where we've been, and then if you want to go back and listen to why, you can always go back and take a listen. But in the meantime, this is what we've done so far. Also to clarify, because not every time when we talk did we always say whose favorite was what. So just to be clear, this is what we got so far. So just to go over the list, Raiders of the Lost Ark is both of our Matt's favorite film, one of my favorites, top 15. Jaws is one of our favorites. Alien, Blade Runner, Seven, Inception, The Godfather, Chinatown, and Goodfellas. Pretty good list there of favorites for both of us, right?
Incredible films.
So Halloween's one of my favorites. Matt put his on his honorable mention list. Terminator, same. Interstellar, same. The Dark Knight is one of Matt's favorite films, but it was an honorable mention for me. And Heat is one of Matt's favorite films, and an honorable mention for me. And Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, Robocop, Superman the movie, Psycho, LA Confidential, The French Connection, Goldfinger, The Right Stuff, Scarface, Road to Perdition, and Shawshank Redemption. Those are all Matt's favorites. Didn't put those in my honorable mention list. And then my favorites that aren't on his honorable mention list are Carrie, The Shining, A Nightmare on Elm Street, Die Hard, Memento, All the President's Men, Tree of Life, Marathon Man, Manhunter, and Requiem for a Dream. So in this episode, we will finish the list, and also we'll go over some honorable mentions in different categories to finish out so that everybody's got a sense. I mean, we could go on and on. I mean,
Yeah, we could spend hours talking about our favorite films. If we just had the time to just think back and draft lists of 100 or more films, we could do it forever.
so let's get to it then. Next that is off of your list is
hmm
classic horror. You
hmm
want to talk about your next selection?
Yes. My next selection here is King Kong, 1933. And obviously, there have been some remakes, but I don't think you can outdo the charm and the originality of the 1933 version. Marion Cooper directed the film. Willis O'Brien was the lead stop motion effects artist, and his apprentice was Ray Harryhausen, who his work continued up until our teenage years. And the interesting thing about this film, every now and then we'll see a film come along that it sets a new standard for visual effects. And in the early 30s, this was certainly a film that did that. And one of the breakthroughs with it was that they were able to combine live action and stop motion. And granted, some of the shots look a little cheesy by today's standards, but it's pretty remarkable what they were able to do at such an early time in cinema history. In terms of subject matter, you've got the exploitation of nature with these people that want to capitalize on taking Kong from his island, his element, and bringing him back to the city to make money off of him. Exploitation of nature. You've got, civilization versus nature theme. And I know that you want to talk more about themology of the film. What comes to mind at your end?
Oh yeah. In my horror film class, we talked about what the representation of Kong was, and the film theory of it is that people identify with Kong because he's kind of like a clumsy adolescent boy who's trying to have sexually this woman that he can't have, and so this creates identification for him. In that, I mean, there's some pretty overt sexuality for that era. They didn't have the code yet, so there were some things that were cut that when it got added back in, it's like, oh, okay, I could see why that might have been trimmed. So there are two theories of horror films that Robin Wood was the one who came up with it, and it was about reactionary versus progressive horror. Reactionary horror is that which reinforces the stability of society. So the monster is the other, something to be feared. Ultimately, society quashes it. In progressive horror, aspects of society that are not part of the predominant culture, their point of view becomes acceptable. A good example of each, I guess, well, King Kong, I guess, reactionary, because in the end, even though we do sympathize a bit, he is ultimately destroyed by society. And even though we feel somewhat tragic about it, that is the ultimate end for him, is he's destroyed. A progressive one, I mean, Get Out would be a great example of a progressive one, because society is what's messed up, and the lead character, an African American going to this white community, he is the one, he would normally be considered the other, but he's the one who is threatened by the community. So a little bit of a political angle on horror, but a lot of horror is that way. So when you have like Friday the 13th where kids are all having sex and then they get killed, I mean that's the commentary of a reactionary culture saying don't do that, otherwise you might get killed. That's kind of a simplistic notion of it, but that's, this is a great example of a film that kind of goes into showing how that works.
Definitely.
So you have a fondness for this particular category. So I believe you
I
also have some
do.
honorable mentions.
I do. I believe Dracula's on my honorable mention list. I love the old Universal horror films. And as we've discussed, Dracula's certainly not the best of the Universal horror films. In fact, a lot of people feel that the Spanish version, which was shot at night, while the English version was shot during the day, they would shoot the Spanish version on the same sets at night. So a lot of people feel that's a superior film. For Dracula, for me, it's all about Bela Lugosi and the mystique that he brought to the role, the look that he brought to the role. And we got to give credit to the DP. The DP on that film was a gentleman by the name of Carl Frund. And there's some beautiful shots in Dracula. Films that Universal horror films that I think are superior to Dracula, though, include The Bride of Frankenstein, 1935, James Whale, his follow up to Frankenstein, which is a pretty incredible horror film. It's got a great score as well. And then probably my favorite Universal horror film is the 1954 Creature from the Black Lagoon. It's still my favorite movie monster by a hair. There's a lot of movie monsters I love, but the design of the creature I think really holds up even by today's standards. And the fact they were able to use that suit both in the water and outside the water with effectiveness and realism. And then the other great thing about Creature is they shot it in 3D. And I remember my parents telling me about seeing it in the 50s in 3D. And we've been lucky because the Blu-ray 3D that we can all watch at home is actually outstanding. The 3D quality is as good as anything you'll see in Avatar, in my opinion. And, this was old school 3D, not CG created 3D, but old school two rolls of film going through a camera and, you know, being used in a theater that way. So, some pretty incredible films. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, the one that I've gone back to the most is the first Frankenstein. So the science versus overcoming nature and losing that theme is such a huge theme through especially sci-fi horror when you get into Cronenberg and Alien, things like that. So the genesis of that was obviously the novel and then the film, and the even Guillermo's new film has some nice touches where he even embellishes that theme even more. I still lean toward the original over Guillermo's very lush remake, but I appreciate still the new angle from the modern perspective as well. So
Hmm.
all right, so getting into a little bit more modern horror, my
Hmm.
selection of Don't Look Now, I just connected to this approach of this film very early on, even before I had a family, but after I had a family, even more, because it deals with the death of a child. And the opening sequence is just such a disturbing, chilling intro to that story that it has a feel to it of almost like the supernatural is really present in the world and it's there and it pervades the whole film. There's the way it's shot, just the tone of it, it just makes you believe that the supernatural in certain areas, maybe certain events, it's definitely part of our existence. So it's kind of hard to explain how it works that way. You have to really just watch it. I guess the best thing I could do is say, go watch The Exorcist as well. Both of those films, early 70s, um, around the same time they came out, and they both capture that. I think The Exorcist is a little bit too just disturbing for me to want to revisit often. And Don't Look Now, there's such a sympathetic relationship between the husband and the wife. And it has one of the great sex scenes in film, by the way. There's a scene after their child has died and they're trying to reconnect. They go to Venice, and this sex scene is so passionate and raw. You could just get the sense that they're trying to purge these emotions that are welling up inside of them, that as a parent, if anybody's a parent and sees this movie, I mean, you'll understand what's going on psychologically. So this film just blows me away. It was a later in life find of mine. It wasn't something um that I saw in my childhood, and probably was good that I didn't, because I was in at least early adulthood and the themes really resonated with me.
I saw it in early 90s in film school, and I just remember the haunting feeling it gave me. And I can't relate to the film from a parental standpoint since I don't have children, but great performances, wasn't it? Julie Christie and
Donald Sutherland.
Donald Sutherland. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and the cinematography by, well, the director is a cinematographer, Nicholas Roeg. So
Hmm.
you can feel that tactile quality of the care of the shots from a director who knows how to light and shoot. I mean, it definitely is part of how it creates that effect. So now other modern horror films, you actually, The Exorcist is one of your honorable mentions. So
Hmm.
and
Well, The Exorcist for me is the scariest movie. It's still the film that frightens me whenever I watch it. And, its performance, its visual effects, its sound design, its music, Friedkin's direction. 74 is when this film came out. And Linda Blair was like 12 at the time, I think. And, she has to go through all this prosthetic makeup and deliver this amazing performance. It's one of those films where all the teams came together, all the best work of all the teams, the sound design in particular, like Megan's possessed voice. Whenever I watch the film, I hear that. And sometimes I can't sleep at night after watching the film, you know. But it's also a fascinating concept, the idea of possession and exorcism. And it's not anything I've ever witnessed firsthand, but, I've watched interviews with people, many of the cloth, that claim to have been present during exorcisms. And I got to say, on the one hand, I don't know if I'd ever want to watch something like that. But on the other hand, I'm really fascinated to see if I would truly believe that someone's possessed by what I would see in reality. So it's one of those, it's a dark film. It's a dark film, and it's Friedkin at his best. And they
it's
got
very
away with some pretty dark stuff in there, like the crucifix scene,
Yeah, I was gonna
where
say it gets away with a lot because it's actually a very religious film. I mean, because it deals with sacrilege, it also reinforces religion because again, if you could prove the devil exists, then God exists too. So it made audiences believe that the devil exists, and in turn, it reinforces then the religious view. So I think religious people actually are more affected by the film than people who, for instance, maybe are not Catholic or Christian. So
absolutely.
those of course being the same.
Yeah, very, very effective movie. And I got to touch on Dick Smith, the makeup extraordinaire who worked on it. And I've told you this before. When I saw this film, probably in the early 80s, when I was 12 years old or something, I thought Max von Sydow was an old guy they cast in the film. And it was the incredible work of Dick Smith to make him look at the age in the film that he was. And it just, another feather in the cap of Dick Smith and what he was able to achieve in his career with makeup effects.
Yeah. So another reactionary film for sure. The Fog is a early 80s horror. Ghost stories tend to be about things from the past that resurface wrongs that were done, things of that sort. And The Fog is very interesting because it has a sociological aspect to it where this community killed these people in order to get their land and their money and build this colony, that the town that's in that area of California in the story, they got that chance because of taking advantage of those people. And so in the 100-year anniversary of the town, that's when the folks that were wrong come back to basically get their amends. So that bit of sociological quality to the storytelling and the theme is what makes that an elevated ghost story that certainly surpasses what you would typically think from that type of movie. Another modern horror that is an honorable mention for me is Dressed to Kill. I've talked about it earlier as a reflection of Psycho and kind of a extension of the themes from Psycho. Brian De Palma at his best visually with the psychological, especially use of slow-mo and things of that sort. He's still a very masterful visualist, and the sense of flow to some of those scenes that he creates with music. He's got a 10-minute long almost scene of just Angie Dickinson walking through a museum and then going outside to hook up with a guy that she was following around and kind of having him chase her through the museum, and sort of this low energy chase that they're doing with each other, kind of a dance. And then, of course, just throws in a little piece of the frame where the killer actually was following her too, through all of it, that you catch at the end of the scene. Anyway, it's that elegance that De Palma brings to horror that makes that such an interesting one. So the other modern horror for you, which is also, I don't know, more of a thriller, but it was written by Stephen King. You want to talk about The Dead Zone a little bit?
Yeah, The Dead Zone, 1983, David Cronenberg. Um, this is grounded Cronenberg in a way, and you have a character played by Christopher Walken who's in a car accident. He's in a coma following the car accident, and he develops the ability to see the future when he touches people. And Martin Sheen plays this presidential candidate, Greg Stilson, who
Well, he was running for Senate at that time.
that's right,
So,
that's
but
right,
it's in his
yeah,
future that he might become president someday.
yeah. And then Walken sees the vision of him basically firing the nukes and causing World War III and potentially the end of the world. And there's really great performances. Christopher Walken and Brooke Adams plays his love interest. And during the time he's in the coma, she ends up meeting and marrying off to another man. And so Walken deals with the realization that he's lost the love of his life. But, she clearly still loves him. And so there's a touching scene where they physically wreck it, get back together. And the interesting thing is you watch the film, you don't feel this is a horrible thing for the characters to do. It feels right because they loved each other and their romance was cut off in such a tragic way. But, even though she's moved on and married and he's kind of in a limbo state, you actually are pleased the two characters were able to hook up in that manner. What
Yeah,
comes to mind at your end?
the ethics of this movie is what's so interesting, and you're right. It's not a film that really has the Cronenberg touch, as he would call it, what he adds to films. I mean, except for maybe a couple of scenes, he does some of the more like gnarly flourishes. But for the most part, he makes this one as commercial and audience friendly as he can possibly do. And for the most part, kind of a under the radar release when it came out. But later on, of course, they remade it as a series, and I think it got even more attention. But I mean, this was really a big miss by audiences, honestly, because I mean, it's very moving. I mean, what happens to him is terrible. That he's in a coma. His girlfriend, fiance, moves on. She didn't wait for him because she thought he wasn't going to ever come out. His life is turned upside down by these. He can't touch anybody because if he does, then he has these shocking visions. I mean, yeah, you're right. When she says, we never got to really consummate our relationship, and even though I'm married, I feel like we kind of deserve this, and you don't feel like it's a sin for him to
Mm-mm.
and her to do it. I mean, it's
No.
almost like it wasn't fair. I mean, life, and this film gets a lot. I mean, his mother's very religious, and obviously at one point he says, look what God has done to me. He threw a truck at me, and I lost my life." So he's
Mhm.
like, he's having this huge self-doubt about what God has, if God exists, then God has really done him wrong. And then later on, when he realizes that he has a gift that came from all this, and there are instances where weird things have happened where people get hit in the head and suddenly they immediately know how to speak Portuguese and stuff. I mean, there's weird things
Yeah.
that have happened.
There's suddenly a musician maestro,
Right. And so these
It's
are real
fascinating.
events that have actually happened that people document. I mean, it is. It's like a curse and a gift. The ethical question that it brings up is, if you could kill Hitler before Hitler became Hitler, would you do it? I mean, the answer to the question is obviously is. I mean, he knows that that's what's going to happen. So for him, it's ethical. Now, normally I wouldn't say that political crime is ethical because no one knows anything about what's going to ever happen in the future. But it's an interesting philosophical question. I think the other side of it is kind of answered by Minority Report. If you want to look at another film that deals with foreknowledge of crime, and there's always the chance that a person won't do the thing that they might do. So that's why you don't convict them before they do it. So similarly, you don't go around in life killing someone just because you suspect they might do something in the future. But certainly as a philosophical question, it's very interesting to pose it. I think certainly if you would give your life to stop Hitler in the way that the character in this movie gives his life to stop nuclear war, you would do it. So very interesting philosophical film.
Also, a very heartwarming score in a way at times, but also, and Howard Shore's, done a lot of collaborations with Cronenberg.
This was not Howard Shore.
It wasn't Howard Shore?
No, this is
Okay.
Michael Kamen. It's
All
a
right.
great
Well, we
score
cut.
though.
Yeah.
And also it should be noted that the music embellishes the emotion a lot. Michael Kamen, he's done a lot of both. He did Lethal Weapon with Eric Clapton and David Sanborn, I think. So he's done some film scores, but he also worked in the rock world. But this was a very moving score that he did.
Sure was.
If you want to talk more about that, you can comment.
No, you've touched on it perfectly.
Okay. So more thrillers of the more darker variety. Since we're coming out of horror, we can continue with the dark one. Your honorable mention, David Fincher's Zodiac.
Yes. Zodiac, I forget what year Zodiac came out, 2007. So I believe it's post Fight Club. And we've been recently talking about films that involve a lot of characters and a lot of talking in the film, discussionary, verbal between characters. And I think Fincher certainly was influenced by films like All the President's Men, where you have scenes of a lot of different characters talking, telephone, in person. And how do you make that exciting? Social Network's another one where I think he was influenced by All the President's Men. So with Zodiac, you have a whole lot of characters, especially in the scenes of the newspaper, where you have a table full of people all talking. And, the film's riveting. It's edited impeccably. It's beautifully shot, just like every Fincher film. And the performances are terrific. I know it's one interpretation of who the Zodiac killer could have been, but it raises certainly some plausible possibilities that perhaps they were right. What are your thoughts about it?
Well, Zodiac Killer in San Francisco was the inspiration for Dirty Harry with the Scorpio. So it was already sort of addressed in film, but this is more the real version and wasn't made in the 70s. So he recreates the period of the 70s and he does it well. Like he does everything else. His attention to detail is fantastic. And just the compulsion by these people in order to try to figure out who Zodiac is, it basically upends a lot of their lives. And so, the through line from Zodiac, The Insider, which is one we're going to talk about in a little bit, actually, All the President's Men, is you put a lot on the line to get to the truth. I got to say this, but maybe it's a little early. I was going to say it toward the end of this episode, but a lot of what makes great film isn't just popcorn and butts and seats and having a good time at the movies. Like the great films, the thing that you're getting at is truth. So the truth of humanity, the truth that could really happen, or if it couldn't happen, it should. You know what I'm saying? There's got to be some kind of feeling like you're not just being given a bill of goods that isn't worth anything and it's going to leave your mind the moment you leave the theater. And so in Zodiac, definitely for these people, they were looking for truth and they were obsessed by it, particularly Gyllenhaal. And, there's a point in the movie where it's like, is it going to kill him? He might actually be in the Zodiac's basement. And, toward the end of the film, you're wondering, is this going to be where he gets, meets his subject that he's been pursuing?
Yeah, it's a long film, but it goes by quickly. And, that's a big part of, I think, Fincher and the editing, just cutting that film to keep it moving, and it doesn't disappoint.
Yeah. All right. So moving toward the more dramatic thrillers versus the tense, Godfather 2 is arguably a thriller. It comes from the gangster genre, has a little bit more gangsterism in terms of events happening than the first film. So we get a little bit of the taste of street crime in the flashback scenes with De Niro playing Vito before he becomes Marlon Brando. And then we get Michael, after almost being killed at his home, basically trying to unravel the mystery of who's trying to kill him and why. So this one is on both of our honorable mention lists. So if it was on our favorite film list, I don't think anybody would argue with it. So what are your comments about Godfather 2?
Well, it's an incredible follow-up. A lot of people consider it better than Godfather 1. I actually prefer Godfather 1 myself, but Godfather 2, it's a close second. And the intercutting between the story of the young Don and the present day with Michael and what he's going through running the family, it's amazing. It really is incredible. And, there's the famous story where Brando, probably, I think it's financial, they couldn't get Brando to agree to return. So they had to come up with this idea of, well, what are we going to do for the sequel if we don't get Brando? And so they came up with this brilliant idea of, well, present day, we're going to show Michael. And then in the past, we're going to have De Niro play the young Don. And then at the end, there's this great long take shot where they're all at the table and they use the sound of what you believe the Don to be coming home, and then the characters one by one get up and leave the dining table, and the last one seated at the table is Michael, and it's goes along with the theme of Michael's now the boss, but yet at the same time he's the boss of this family, but yes, at the same time he's isolated. And by the third film, we see the tremendous loss that he experienced in addition to that isolation of having to run the family. Something his father never wanted. The Don, as we discussed previously, the Don didn't want Michael to run the family business. He wanted something different for Michael, but yet fate had different plans. And it's a remarkable film. And I think Gordon Willis shot this one as well. Is that?
Yeah, so Michael was the one who was, like you said, not intended to be the leader of the family, but he was the most effective. So the thing is that as he was so effective, he was losing everybody around him by being so efficient as the mafia don. So the tragedy of it, of course, is that he was doing all this, he thought, to protect the family, but he was actually alienating most of them. So there's a scene where he talks to his mother, and she's like, well, you can't really lose your family, she tells him, but that's exactly what happens to him. So,
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tragedy.
yeah, that's the tragedy of it. So moving on, the next three are James Bond films for you.
Well, we'll start with Spy Who Loved Me, 1977. Roger Moore. I think this was Roger Moore's third Bond film, and maybe I'm wrong on that, but it feels like the third Bond film he did. And this for me hit at a time when I probably saw it. I was probably like 8 or 9, maybe 10. So I had already seen Star Wars. I might have seen Empire. And for a Bond film, there was a big scope to this movie. The other great thing about it was when I was a child, my mom was teaching art history and she talked my dad into taking us to Egypt. So when I saw that The Spy Who Loved Me had shot in Cairo and other parts of Egypt, I just loved it because I just really have an affinity for ancient Egypt. So that film hit me at a young age and has stuck with me since. We've got 2006, Martin Campbell's directorial effort of Daniel Craig and Casino Royale. Just an incredible debut Bond performance with Daniel Craig. An amazing film, great cast, great villain played by Mads Mikkelsen. Just a terrific movie all around. One of my favorites. And then we've got Skyfall, which is another incredible movie. Sam Mendes, 2012. Between Casino Royale and Skyfall, I mean, those are two of the best Bond films in the history of Bond films. And both star Daniel Craig, and they're amazing. They touch on all the aspects we love about a Bond film, big action sequences, big set pieces. And then the Daniel Craig films really grounded the darkness of what Bond goes through and character flaws that Bond is dealing with. And so that's why they're on my runner-up list.
Well, not the hugest fan of really any of the more Bonds, but I am a big fan of Casino Royale and Skyfall. I mean, I guess if I was to pick the Roger Moore, that one would be the most fun overall. But Casino Royale and Skyfall, I mean, that's very respectable choices for a favorite list, honorable mention list, or what have you. Casino Royale, the Vesper Lynd story is one of the most impactful dramatically of any Bond film. So I can't really knock that choice at all. I go back and forth between Skyfall and Casino Royale, honestly, because that part is so compelling and it just drives him for the next couple of movies, losing her and also just the setup for him, getting into how he became an agent. And then Skyfall, and Mendez's direction and Roger Deakins' photography, it's just a beautifully shot, just needlessly beautiful shot Bond film. Obviously a huge hit worldwide. It was probably one of if not the biggest grossing Bond film. Very, very impressive work there, and a huge bar for whoever the new team is going to be with Denis Villeneuve directing. Obviously, he's going to bring some magic of some kind. Not sure what his angle is going to be, but he's got a very large bar to cross.
And Stephen Knight writing the script.
Okay, yeah, that doesn't hurt either. All right. So moving into now classics, we are not immune to the charms of classic films. I picked one to put on my favorites list. And a lot of people say, well, that's obvious, Citizen Kane. I mean, honestly, it is just such a masterfully directed, written, shot, everything. It doesn't feel dated somehow. I mean, yeah, it's of its time, but the point of view and the use of all of the techniques of cinematography and everything just that goes into it, the structure, having little pieces of his story being told bit by bit by different people that knew him. I think having Mank as the Fincher film called him, Herman Mankiewicz, who knew Randolph Hearst, getting some angle for how to develop things about the Kane character, who's not exactly William Randolph Hearst, but certainly based on him somewhat. Enough so to where I guess there was definitely some anger and some requests for RKO to burn the negative and things like that, because he was so pissed off about what Mankiewicz put into that script. Not to mention just the whole Rosebud thing. Do you know the Rosebud thing?
So Rosebud is the sled, his
No, it's
childhood
not in
sled.
real life. It isn't. That's what it
Tell
is
me
in the
about that.
movie.
Tell me what that.
Okay. Apparently, the story goes is that Marion Davies, the actress that was with Hearst, apparently he would call her clitoris Rosebud. So when he slipped that into the movie, there was screaming up in San Simeon, supposedly. Okay, so you can understand why he was so mad. If that's true, if that is
God,
not just a folk tale, okay? But
love it. I love it.
okay. So anyway, I could see why Rosebud would be meaningful to him, and maybe he would remember that on his dying deathbed. So, but anyway, not the same wave with Charles Foster Kane. But anyway, so what do you have to say about it? I mean, obviously you
Well,
studied this in film school. You had to.
oh yeah, it's one of the first films that I think we're showing in film school to discuss. And one of the amazing things to me is Orson Welles was 25, and not only is he directing, but he also worked on the script with Mankiewicz, and he's starring in the film at 25 years old. I mean, talk about a huge responsibility for a young man to take on. And then you touched on the cinematography. The deep focus cinematography is just gorgeous. It broke ground with camera work, and it's just an amazing film. And not the most exciting film. I know some young people today might be bored by it, but if they would just sit back and just think about when it was made and the technology they had at the time and what they accomplished at the time, it's history. It's cinematic history, and it's a remarkable film.
I think it's masterfully paced. I don't think it's boring at all. It talks about politics and
Hmm.
the psychology of this massive, man who owned newspapers and was going to change the world and all the things that drove him. So it's just such a compelling character study that just peels back the layers. And you're right, Wells, I don't know how he could play someone twice his age in parts of this movie at that age and still make it all so credible. I mean, it is a absolutely stunning achievement.
Yeah, it is.
So, all right. So there's a number of films that are honorable mentions for me that are classics. There's one of yours as well. Actually, is a Wells film, Touch of Evil, on your list. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is an amazing noir film, 1958. Again, Wells not only directs but stars in the film, which we see that today in films, but I don't know how those guys do it. That's such a focus to be paying attention to both aspects. Charlton Heston is in it. We've got
Playing a
this
Mexican,
incredible, right, right.
of
We've
all
got
things.
this incredible this incredible opening shot that lasts almost 3 minutes long, and
They
it's
put
a
the
it's a
credits over initially.
yeah, yeah, it's an awesome tracking shot, and it's one of those that in film school, it was one of the early things they had us watch,
Yeah, it's like
and
one of the best shots ever made, and they put
yeah,
credits over it. The
yeah,
studio obviously knew what they were doing, right?
right. It's interesting. At the time it came out, it wasn't overly well received, but in the years since, I think certainly developed a lot of appreciation and a lot of love, and it's a remarkable film. What
Well,
comes to
let me
mind
tell
with
you
you?
something. Matt. You kind of understate it um, on where it is now in terms of respect. You take okay. There are websites out there where they'll take all the best of lists from critics and all this. And one of the ones I go to that's like this is called "They Shoot Pictures, Don't They?" So this website, he's been compiling lists for years of what people thought were the greatest films ever made. Touch of Evil is now in the top 100. I think around the top 50 films ever made.
Cool.
So it's
Okay.
I think the second highest Wells directed film. And when he did it, he didn't really, I'm just doing this for hire. This isn't what I want to do. It's just some sketchy story. But it's now revered as one of these great pieces of art.
Hmm.
Kind of the nail in the coffin at the end of the noir period. It's in the last year of what's considered the true noir period. I believe it's 1958.
It was.
But this is a person working for hire that creates under pressure, as they talk about in the Get Shorty stuff. They're talking about, John Travolta's talking about, Orson Welles made one of his best films when he was just under pressure to make the film. So it works. You can do it. So, yeah, anybody that thinks that you can't still put your vision into things even while you're doing something for somebody else, you can they call it smuggling.
Smuggling.
Yes. So when filmmakers get things that they want into films that they want to talk about, but maybe it's not something that would be viewed as acceptable, something that they get it around the censors maybe, or maybe the subject matter that talks about something. Jack Warner famously said, "If I want to send a message, I'll call Western Union." But a lot of filmmakers really still wanted to say something in their film. So smuggling. So I'm not saying that necessarily he had like some huge message that's secretly in Touch of Evil, but he still put a lot of himself into this. So if you've seen his other noirish type films, even Citizen Kane is somewhat noirish. But you know, we have Lady from Shanghai. Actually, The Stranger, I think, is an underrated one. I think it's marvelous. I mean, it's a not maybe top 100, but it's a nice noir film. He did a lot in that vein.
One last thought on Touch of Evil's the Henry Mancini score. Terrific score in that film.
Right. Okay, so moving down, I have a bunch of classics that I would give honorable mentions to. Casablanca, it's again, it shouldn't be as good as it is. It was just kind of a programmer, and they just got the right writers, the right actor. I mean, they didn't even want Bogart initially, but I think other more at the time higher level actors turned it down, and he gladly took it and ran with it. And who do we remember now? We remember him. The messaging in that film of heroism works. The psychological turmoil he goes through when she walks in, of all the gin joints in the world, she walked into his, and he was just trying to get over her. And I mean, he goes flashing back into Paris, and at that moment, you're just completely wrapped into that story. It's just masterfully well made, but should never. It's basically lightning struck, and now it's one of the all-time great films. So another Bogart film, a noir film, In a Lonely Place. I think that one was a little bit more personal to him. A lot of people don't really know it. I advise people to go seek it out. It's interesting because Bogart is not really heroic at all in this. You're wondering if he's really a bad person that might have been involved in criminal activities. He's in a relationship with a woman, and she's starting to question him as well, and it's tense and um, ultimately kind of tragic. So I think it's a great noir film that a lot of people don't really know unless they really have studied the classics, and it is one that people should seek out. A classic of dialogue, if we're talking about Herman Mankiewicz earlier for Citizen Kane, his brother was hell of a writer, all about Eve. Joseph Mankiewicz directed and wrote. It is one of the most crackerjack dialogue films ever. I mean, it is so bitchy. I mean, these lines that they're slinging at each other, it is just, Betty Davis, at her most caustic. I mean, it is, and it's a biting film about theater, but a lot of it can apply to film as well. So there's all this meta commentary about their business that's in this movie. And, again, a lot of times filmmakers, they do best writing what they know. And if they work in the film business, they're going to write it really well. So again, if you want to be entertained, again, just put on your classics mode and realize, okay, yeah, it's not set in the modern day, kind of get into it. And it's just fantastic, snappy, quippy lines all the way through. Now getting a little bit more in the artsy realm, getting into also foreign films, Italian, Fellini, of course, you can't have a conversation about all that film encompasses artistically without talking about Fellini. 8.5 is, again, another very internal, personal film about his world as an artist. The cinematography is amazing. It will help you understand what people mean when they say it's Fellini-esque. There is actually, he has his own descriptor. So seek that one out if you're into just watching nonstop, amazing shot after shot from a person that's basically looking inward. And talk about looking inward. Nobody does it better than Ingmar Bergman. Ingmar Bergman's persona is probably the most compelling psychology exploration. And he's got a number of films that are. I mean, we got Wild Strawberries, Scenes from a Marriage. I mean, nobody better than him. And this film deals with duality. It's about an actress who stops talking. What it is that her nurse starts to have conversations with her about her life, and she's pouring all of herself into the silent actress. And over time, there's a power play between them where their personalities begin to sort of merge, where the nurse is sort of desperate to, in a sense, get some kind of equilibrium with this other person who she feels like has power over her. Without this film, you then don't have things like Mulholland Drive, I think, later on. If this is considered a top 20 or 25 all-time film. 8.5 is probably considered a top 10 all-time film. Casablanca obviously is very high up there as well. Okay, so On the Waterfront should be obvious for any Marlon Brando fan. This is the method at its finest. Scenes where he simply, even Maurice Saint drops a glove in the middle of the scene. He picks it up and starts putting it on his hand and talking, and it just feels like they're actually having this conversation. This is what the method was all about. It's not actors talking at each other. It's people being that they're portraying. And Elia Kazan was a great director of actors, as much as people want to knock him for whatever his political issues were. And people may even try to knock this film as well, because a lot of people view it as his rationalization of why he gave names to the House Un-American Activities Committee. But the thing is, not everybody necessarily was thinking that communism wasn't a threat. And maybe he did actually think it was a threat and felt like he was doing his patriotic duty to report things. People are entitled to their opinions on these things. I know everybody is sort of now post-judged everyone, including him. I'm not going to be going out there saying that he was absolutely wrong. I mean, I didn't live in his shoes, so I don't know. And I think people, a lot of times it's easier to judge these things after the fact than during it. So I think this is a fantastic film. It should not be lowered on its status just because of the political aspects that related to its making. I think the story itself about being a person that stands up against, in this case, a criminal union, I think that is a worthy message and is very well done. My last two, I'm going to throw in a silent film, because silent films are some great ones. Before you had Dracula, you had Nosferatu. The director of Nosferatu is F.W. Murnau. He came to Hollywood and brought, his German expressionism with him, and he made Sunrise, which many people would look at Sunrise as probably the best silent film ever made. Certainly in the top 5, if you want to put in stuff like Passion of Joan of Arc or Metropolis, things like that. Sunrise is fantastic. It's about a guy who thinks he wants to leave his wife for this harlot who he's all caught up on. And then he goes to have one last day with his wife, and he finds out why he had fallen in love with her to begin with. And it's very psychological. It's very expressionistic and dark and dreamy, and shows why you don't necessarily have to have a lot of talking for a film to be fantastic.
Excellent. I'll add it to my list.
Generally speaking, I would say that, if you look at a critics list, a compilation of critics lists, it'll be a top 10 all-time film. At the time it came out, I didn't win the Oscar for Best Picture because and this is, again, I don't know whether this is true or not, or if this is just a folk story, but the word is that it was so highly revered when it came out. They said, well, we can't give this Best Picture because this is like on a different level of what everyone else is doing. I mean, it's kind of like diminishing it to say it was the best picture. It's like something else. It's like this piece of amazing art that's just way above the movies that we're all making. So it is a really magnificent movie. And then Black Narcissus, British film, Technicolor in the 40s, stunning color photography at a time when there weren't that many color films that were being made. And this is a Powell and Pressburger film. They went on to make The Red Shoes. A lot of people know that one more today. But if you see, for instance, Oscar's reel about cinematography, many times they will throw shots of Black Narcissus in. And it is a striking film that deals with religion and repression of the animal instincts in people. So it's set in a convent in an Asian country where these nuns are all living together, and this man is doing work for the convent, and he kind of stirs up these passions, and you get this one particular nun that kind of goes off the rails and goes psychotic. So it addresses religious issues in a favorable way, and why, for instance, the lead is Deborah Kerr, why she became a nun. And, it's not meant to be an attack on spiritualism and religion, but it addresses that, like you've talked about, I think initially when you talked about why you aren't religious, it does address that sometimes religion can cause harm with people as well if it overwhelms what they really need in their lives in some ways that aren't healthy for them. So I don't think this film probably could have been made in Hollywood in the 40s with the code. I think it might have been a little too dangerous, but it was made in England and it is still a compelling watch today. So that pretty much wraps up my classics list. I mean, if we were to have 100 films, there'd probably be another or 10 classics I could throw on there. But anyway, so drama is not something that we've hit a lot in terms of modern dramas as well that are favorites of mine. Dangerous Liaisons is a period drama that was made in the 80s, but again, amazing writing. John Malkovich, Glenn Close shooting barbs at each other for most of the running time. Michelle Pfeiffer, just you can see why Malkovich would fall in love with her and basically just would want to die if he can't have her ultimately. It's a really moving film that has a lot of like acid running through it up until the end. The Insider, a Michael Mann
Mm.
film that we mentioned earlier that we would be hitting at some point, deals with tobacco executive who whistleblows on the fact that they're basically aware that they're killing people with cancer from putting chemicals into the nicotine to make it a better nicotine delivery system. You want to make some comments on The Insider?
You know, Michael Mann at his best, impeccably shot, impeccably cut. The film moves. You know, it's not an action film, but it's suspenseful and it's entertaining, and a great performance by Russell Crowe and a great performance too by Al Pacino. And, you know, it's a terrific movie.
Yep. I think that's one that with time, again, people maybe forgotten a little bit. I'd like to see that one come out a little bit more and people call it out because it is a very well made film in the way that Michael Mann is a perfectionist and repeat viewings are rewarded usually. So we're going to get into Sundance Revolution on film at some point. Sex, Lies, and Videotape is kind of credited as the film that kicked it all off in basically 1989, I believe it was. So definitely not a typical 80s film. Um, but very good for the psychology of film because it deals with a guy who has a sexual hangup to such a point that he has abstained from all sex because of the fact that he was in a relationship where he hurt someone. Um, Starts falling for the wife of his friend, who's a very together and repressed kind of woman who doesn't realize that her husband is having an affair with her sister. But when she does find out, let's just say that she gets her own revenge. But the way that the main character of that film deals with his urges is that he records women talking about sex. And so ultimately, Annie McDowell's character, the wife of his friend, ends up not only talking to the camera, but also turning it on him. So, do you recall that film?
I do. Was that the directorial debut from Steven Soderbergh?
That was the one where Soderbergh made his splash, and it was a big splash, and he's been working steadily ever since.
And Peter Gallagher was the lead in that.
Yeah, but James Spader's
That's right,
character was
Spader.
obviously the more compelling one. He was the guy with the sexual hang up. He wasn't the normal kind of assholish type that he plays in films. He was more of a sensitive type, but so I can't really say he was being James Spaderish in this one. He was very sympathetic, actually. I like this film a great deal. Virgin Suicides by Sofia Coppola. To me, it kind of makes all those 80s teen movies look kind of obsolete. She really brought a maturity and a female perspective that, even though Amy Heckerling, directed Fast Times at Ridgemont High, I don't know, there was something just so feminine about her voice in Virgin Suicides. I know a lot of people love Lost in Translation. I think it's a great film. It's a mature film, but I think Virgin Suicides was a little bit more pure Sofia Coppola coming out of the gate. Lost in Translation is her relating some things that happened when she was with Spike Jonze. Kirsten Dunst, fantastic in it. Again, deals with a religious household where the girls are being overly protected by the parents and how it causes this, again, explosion of violence ultimately in the family. So I mean, I think the title kind of says it all about where this goes. But for that genre, the teen genre, I think it really stands out as a very mature work, especially for
I
a first
just
film.
absolutely, I recall Kristen Dunst's performance, and that's incredible. She's really terrific. And she wasn't that old when she did it, probably early 20s, if that.
Right. Yeah. So another one, Wall Street, Oliver Stone's exploration of the world of stocks and stock trading and the corruption in that world. His father apparently was a stock trader, so he got to know a little bit of the inside from his dad. And Oliver Stone never wanted to hold back on the outrage. Just his use of techniques to make a story that's just about corporate raiders so interesting just shows during that time he was on fire. I mean, from Platoon to Born on the Fourth of July, JFK, Natural Born Killers, the filmmaking was just next level. It was complex to a level way beyond what needs to be done to just tell the story. But he was the hottest director of that period, and I'm sorry that he seems to have lost it since then because that was just an amazing creative period for him.
Yeah, it sure was. And the film that got Michael Douglas his Oscar, or at least his acting Oscar, I think he won previously for producing
Yeah, he
for
produced
One
One
Flew
Flew
Over the
Over the
Cuckoo's
Cuckoo's
Nest.
Nest.
But Gordon Gekko, amazing character. The greed is good speech goes down in Hollywood history. And got to give credit to Charlie Sheen. Charlie Sheen did a great job in this film. And, his father, he ends up getting raided by Gordon and screwed over. And it's a great tale about the lust for money and the consequences of greed.
Yeah, and it is a moral tale ultimately, but you're right. A lot of people took the wrong lessons from this film because they think of Gordon Gekko as being some kind of like person to look as a hero in a sense, but he definitely was not. And Martin Sheen and his son playing against each other, that scene in the elevator, very raw, and the fact that they thought to use them together for that scene, it really works very well. And definitely Martin Sheen's character comes out like this is the better man than the mentor that Charlie's going to ultimately betray. And then lastly, for dramas, Witness, I love it because of just the feel of that movie. The opening shot with the music from Maurice Jarre and just the fields flowing and the just this atmosphere that carries them. The first so many minutes, I mean, there's not much dialogue through the point where Kelly McGillis's husband has died and she goes into the city with her son and they ride the train in. You kind of get the boy's perspective, what it's like to be on a train when he's never seen anything technological in his life. And then all the way to the murder. That's when you meet Harrison Ford's character. And then you get this fish out of water scenario where he's wounded and he has to lay low so he doesn't get killed. And he comes to appreciate the lifestyle that they live, even though he can't really go there to live in her world. You can see the connection between them that exists despite the difference of backgrounds. And it's just perfectly nailed every step of the way. Very mature type of cop story that doesn't really focus on the cop stuff as much as it focuses on the feelings and really being very respectful of the Amish and what their lifestyle is. So I just find this film is one that I could put on and just feel kind of relaxed and taken away by its sense of peacefulness.
Yeah, the score, I absolutely love the score. You touched on that. The chemistry with Harrison Ford and Kelly McGillis was terrific. They played off each other really well. The Amish, I have family in Ohio. And so when I go back to Ohio, there's times we drive into Amish country, which is just not an hour drive from where my family out there live. And I'm still astounded here in the 21st century about the Amish and the way they choose to live their lives in modern society. In a way, it's kind of tempting, to get away from all the modern conveniences, or at least some of them, and, have a more simple life. I mean, part of that's kind of tempting to me. But you're right. Peter Weir handled the Amish very respectfully in that film. And you can't help but admire their culture, even though there's issues about it that we may not understand, religion in one particular and their lifestyles. But it's a fascinating film and a very, very great film.
Well, and it's respectful of the religious views as well. So again, I mean, if a person believes something and they follow its tenets, I mean, that is all you can really ask for of a person. A guy like John Book, Harrison Ford's character, he could not fully understand. But when it came down to it, at the end, when the guys with the guns were there and all those people without guns came to support him
Mhm.
and save him, and they didn't do it with guns, they did it with almost like shame. It's like they were there to witness. I mean, the movie's called Witness because the boy witnesses a murder, but they were there to witness what those guys were doing. And, ultimately the guy stands down and he doesn't kill everybody and get out of there. He just drops it, like he said. So anyway, it's a great film.
It is.
Moving on to something totally different now because we're jumping around, finishing this list. You want to do an animated film, and you've got a special one that anyone who's got 7 to 10-year-olds has probably seen and loves as well.
Are we talking about Nightmare Before Christmas?
I believe that would be the one.
Yeah, I love this film. 1993. Harry Selnick directed it, although it was produced by Tim Burton, and it has a very Tim Burton-esque quality about it. Annie Elfman's score and songs. Chris Sarandon did the actual speaking voice of Jack Skellington, but Danny Elfman did the singing voice, and it works really well. And those songs are so catchy, you can't help but sing along whenever you hear them. It's just a fun film. The stop motion's amazing, very, very unique characters, unique character designs, unique environments. Some people could describe it as kind of a little bit of a horror film, which it is, but it's also just pleasantly entertaining and push the art of stop motion further up the from where we've seen it previously. Just a sensational animated film. What are your thoughts about it?
Yeah, you kind of have to introduce your kids to things a little earlier than maybe you would. There's a little bit of stuff in it that's a little bit borderline in terms of kind of a fun way of handling some kind of perhaps macabre type things. But my 3-year-olds were seeing the blowups of Sally and Jack around in the neighborhood as we're walking around during Halloween, and they're curious. And I'm like, well, okay, well, we'll see what you guys think. And they watched it and they liked it. And they said, I want to see Jack again. I want to see Sally again. So, I mean, it's charming, just like you gotta see It's a Wonderful Life for Christmas. In a sense, it's kinda like
Mhm.
this is the Halloween movie, other than if you wanna go to actually something like Halloween.
Right.
It's a safe one that you could do for the family. That's not so bad. But yeah, it's great. All the Tim Burton-esque stuff is there, but a little bit softer. Alright, so other honorable mentions, you've got a couple of animated ones, so
I've got Fantasia on here. And Fantasia, 1940, multiple directors, multiple sequences, classical score used throughout. It's actually a pretty mature animated film. I I'm just blown away by the quality. Again, this is cell animation we're talking about here. This is again long before CG came around and changed the way animation's done these days. But this is all hand drawn cell animation, beautiful. The classical score goes well with it. We've got probably one of the more standout episodes of the film is Mickey Mouse trying to possess a broom to work and carry water for him, which is a great animated sequence. And then there's another one with a creature, Chernobog, I think it's called, or something like that, where it's this demon creature. And I could imagine kids in the 40s just being scared out of their wits by it because it's really intense and it's really intimidating, but beautifully done. And I definitely give it an honorable mention for the quality of animation and all the artists it took to create the film.
yeah, the at that point, all we had was Snow White, and I believe Pinocchio predated it too. So, it was kinda like the 3rd time out the gate, and you're really raising the bar on the artistry of the piece. I mean, it's multiple pieces, of course, but they're all classical music scored pretty much, and you've got not a lot of dialogue or anything going on. So, to expect kids to just revel in the visualness of it, each one kinda different in tone, but yeah, the standouts would be Sorcerer's Apprentice with Mickey and, the, part where he's lording over the town and all the spirits come out of the ground and stuff, the kinda haunted mansion-like atmosphere of that, so
Yeah, great stuff.
and then you got a little bit modern as well with computer animation with your other honorable mention.
Yeah, Toy Story, modern classic, John Lasseter, 1995. Buzz and Woody are now part of our nomenclature, and other characters from the films. And we've had several sequels, and it's a great film for kids. The great thing about the animators and the storytellers at Disney is they give something that not only kids will love, but adults will love too. There's a lot of jokes in Toy Story that go over the kids' heads, but the adults get, and it's same with the other sequels. There's jokes that go over their heads though. And this film was a real pioneering effort in CG. At the time, I'm sure it pushed their computers to capacity with the amount of data they were having to save. And it's just an amazing film. I can't recall who did the score for it, but great music as well.
Randy Newman.
Was it Randy? Okay, that makes sense. But just a heartwarming film. It's one of those again when it's on, I just can't help but stop and watch a little of it. What comes to mind at your end about it?
Well, yeah, it was the groundbreaking use of computer animation that fulfilled the promise of what Pixar was doing. I liked the first one. I liked it even better as it kind of went along in a sense. I mean, it was the groundbreaking first one, so I always give credit when possible to the original. But Toy Story 2 is really funny,
Mhm,
and there's some really great like Star Wars jokes and that are going on with Zurg and Buzz Lightyear. So I mean,
mhm.
there's some stuff that again adults pick up. Toy Story 3 is also pretty funny in spots, especially when Buzz goes into Spanish mode, which is hilarious. And then the ending of that one though just kills you.
Mhm,
Uh, but the thing that runs through it is that this kid it's like his parents are divorced, and these toys are his friends. And just like with ET, with what Spielberg put into that, that's kind of this underlying current. So when you get to Toy Story 3 and he's giving up these toys that were his friends through all that, I mean, it's hard not to just completely lose it, you know?
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
and that's kinda, that you can get a little bit of that at first in the beginning, but you get more of it as it goes on. So, yeah, it's a really special trilogy, and I kinda wish they stopped at 3, but, they gotta keep going.
It's a moneymaker.
Yeah. So my Pixar is Up, and
Mhm.
I think the first 10 minutes of the life story of the main character with his wife before she dies and up until she dies is, again, destroys you, like, right out of the gate, and you're just already like, "Wow." I mean, this mini vignette at the beginning just sets the tone, and then from there, there's some really great humor actually to kinda he's trying to go to take her to this waterfall that she wanted to see that they never went to because they never had a chance to do it, and take her there in the house that they had, and then this boy comes along. So, the boy's kind of a klutz, he's trying to do his Boy Scout duties, and there's a lot of humor between the generations, and then there's humor with the dogs that have the translator that translates their thoughts, and it's really hilarious to hear what a dog is really thinking sometimes,
Mhm.
and that's there's a lot of great humor that runs through that. So, but yeah, so that's my Pixar. So, what do you think of that one?
That opening sequence, that vignette montage of his life with his wife, and then as we learn her passing, it's amazing. It's absolutely incredible, and it hooks you in, and, you know, at that point, you're locked into this film no matter where it goes, and it continues to go to great places, and, touching on loss, I mean, Toy Story, you mentioned, did that with the loss of a parent and a divorce and the loss of the toys losing their childhood owners because they go off to college or whatever. And then with this film, you've got what's the guy that voiced the character? Ed Asner.
Ezra.
Yeah. Um, they didn't hesitate for showing him getting angry and mistreating the boy at times in his grief. And that's real. Grief, we hurt when we grieve and we sometimes aren't ourselves. And that comes out in this film. And it's a beautiful film. It really is. And who did the music for it?
I wanna say it's Michael Giacchino. It could be Michael Giacchino, but if I'm wrong, I will cut it.
Well, it's a
Okay,
terrific score no matter who did it.
right. Then my cell animation is The Lion King. I think, Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast really got things going in the right direction as far as really making those '90s, animated films more cinematic, and then a lot of people that were working on The Lion King, I think, were like, "Ah, this is like the unwanted stepchild," but let me tell you, sometimes, again, lightning strikes. The first 5 minutes, the introduction, the sun coming up, and all the animals coming for the showing of Simba to, all the animals around Pride Rock, and it's like, just right there, the first 5 minutes, you have a mini vignette that at the very beginning is like, boom, and you're like,
Mhm.
"Wow, that I can leave now, that was great." But then you have this whole movie where you've got voice acting by Jeremy Irons, you have, marching hyenas like Nazis, and he's calling them to battle to take over. And you have Simba's watching his father, voiced marvelously by James Earl Jones, dying, and then this heartbreakingly vicious scene where Jeremy Irons says, "It's your fault. You just should just leave because no one's gonna ever want to see you again." I mean, it's just like harsh for a kid to watch this. You're like, "Oh my god, this is hard for an adult to watch. This is tough." And then the circle of life comes back where he grows up and realizes that he's got heroism in him too, just like his dad. So, and then closing with the same way it started. I mean, you have the bookend thing going for it. I mean, it's totally nailed.
The visuals are outstanding. It's a modern Disney classic. There's no disputing that. And it's so ironic. Today, as I was driving, I listened to this musical score channel on Sirius, and I was listening to it today, and Circle of Life came on. And whenever I hear that Elton John song, Circle of Life, I mean, that is it's a powerful song. And obviously, you can't help but think about the movie, the emotion it brought to the movie. But it's just it's a movie about life and death, but done in such a tactful way. Lessons that these kids are getting young as they're watching these animated films that later on, as they become teenagers or older, they'll realize, oh, that's where that film was taking me. I get it now. And it was trying to help me cope with these emotions that I'm now experiencing as an adult. and dealing with life
Yeah.
and the
And,
circle of life.
yeah. So, yeah, it's Elton John and Hans Zimmer. So, I mean, talk about like a
Amazing.
superstar team on the score.
I
Yeah.
know, right?
Yeah.
Amazing.
We're going to talk about Hans Zimmer again when we talk about Gladiator in a little bit. Okay.
But yeah,
So Hans Zimmer, he's the guy these days. He's the John Williams of now, I think, but doing a little bit differently, but still, he's stunning.
it is. He's great.
All right, so animation's a little bit fantasy-like, oftentimes based on fantasy themes. So I think you've got a actual favorite film that is a fantasy, and if I had to name one fantasy film to be my fantasy favorite, that would be probably it too. So go ahead.
Right. So, one of my favorite fantasy films, at least fantasy live action films, is Peter Jackson's 2001 classic, Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. A lot of us know the story that Peter took on directing three films back to back, and in between they would do a little pickup shots, but mostly shooting all three of this trilogy back to back. It's a film that many people said couldn't be made. A lot of people said that Tolkien's book could not be translated into film, but Peter Jackson managed to do it, and his team, and incredible cast, shot entirely on location in New Zealand. Terrific score by Howard Shore. The late Andrew Lesney did the cinematography on all three films, and they're beautifully shot. The effects work by Weta put that company on the map for the work they accomplished. And like Star Wars, it's a beautiful film about good versus evil and friendship and overcoming obstacles. I think the first film of the trilogy is my favorite, although the other two are terrific in their own right. And I think they wrapped it up pretty well with the third film, even though I think a lot of people say there's too many endings, but that's okay. I can live with those additional endings. What are your thoughts about it?
Unquestionably for me, Fellowship is the most perfect of the three. It gets things off to a bang of a start. I'm drawn in. I love the Hobbiton scenes that create the sense of wonder of that community and all the things that they have to leave behind to go on their journey, which is as far away from what they came from as anything you could imagine. And then just the introduction of step by step, the Dark Riders coming after them, the Nazgul, and meeting Aragorn in the village, and just scene after scene, again, like The Godfather. It's like any one of them is just like a perfect. They say a good film is one that has two perfect scenes and no bad scenes or something. And I mean, this is like a full film of like perfect scenes almost. It's really great. And so all the way through, you actually do have consequences where one of the fellowship dies. That doesn't really happen much in the other ones. And it's like, how did somebody not get killed, the rest of the time? It makes you wonder, but showing that some of them were even a bit flawed. I mean, Boromir was flawed and he was tempted, and why Frodo and Sam would go on their own was clear after that happened. So, I mean, again, just needlessly beautiful stuff like going down the river and seeing these two giant statues of kings cut into the rocks, and just the scene with Galadriel and the glowing staircase in the trees. I mean, it's just endless beauty. And yeah, there's some darkness. I mean, the Uruk-hai. I know that Roger Ebert said this isn't my Lord of the Rings. There's too much, darkness.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh my
He's
gosh.
like Tolkien had a lot of whimsical things and songs and stuff like that, and this just focuses on the dark stuff. And I mean, that's the stuff of conflict and drama,
That's the
though.
drama. Yeah.
Right. So it's kind of hard to have, Tom Bombadil. I didn't really read the books. I mean, I've heard people say, well, they could have put that in there, but I don't care. I think for the vision that he had, he hit every beat he wanted to hit, and he got it perfectly right for what he was doing. So they'll probably remake it someday, maybe do it a little bit differently. God hope it's not like the Amazon series and they do it different from that too. So,
Yes.
but yeah, it's nailed.
Yeah. It's an incredible film. Beautiful looking film, like you touched on, and definitely a modern classic.
Yeah. So other fantasy honorable mentions, you've got Pan's Labyrinth. I can't say anything bad about that one either.
I
Go.
do. Great Guillermo del Toro film. It's due in my life for a rewatch. It's been a while, but beautiful makeup work too. Great creatures. Obviously, Guillermo's a big monster creature guy, and that film doesn't disappoint.
But yeah, Pan's Labyrinth is a great blend of fantasy and realism. You've got the fantasy as sort of, again, this allegory is an important part of it. And Pan's Labyrinth is one where the allegory of escaping from a traumatic experience, like being in this fascist dictatorship in Spain, and all this death going around, and there's um, spies that are getting killed and tortured and things like that. And she escapes into this dream world, and in a sense is given an escape from this real world. And that world is dark too, but is it a projection of her um, subconscious in a dream state, or is it really a fantasy world she's going into? So you can interpret it either way, and it's a rewarding film. But the fact that he blends it so well together in that one, I think he does it better than in any film he did afterwards. I actually feel like The Devil's Backbone from earlier does a similarly good job of doing it, and I feel like that, like Shape of Water, I feel like he kind of loses a little bit. Like the real world stuff in The Shape of Water isn't as convincing as Pan's Labyrinth, and I think he should have gotten his best picture, depending on whatever it was up against that year. But that was the best picture of what he was doing more than The Shape of Water was. On the fantasy vein, I didn't pick an actual fantasy film to be an honorable mention because I was trying to look for something that musicals are not my favorite genre. Okay. But yet there are still great musicals. So I would say if you would go, what's the best all time musical? People say Singing in the Rain. I'd say no question. It's an all time classic. It's perfect. It's great. That doesn't really speak to me because I'm not really into that kind of music so much. I'm not a show tunes person. So for me, if I had to pick a musical to be an honorable mention, I would pick La La Land. The music is more modern, it's jazzy. The story is fantastic. It's very moving. It's actually a bit more moving than most musicals. Most musicals do not end quite so down. La La Land is a fantastic drama unto itself. So the scene when she goes into his club at the end, and they both decided they're going to go on their separate ways to fulfill their life dreams. She has this imagining of what life could have been if she had not done that. And that just gets me every time. And so I watched it again with my daughter who wanted to see it, and just I realized why I liked it so much when I saw it the first time. It's great work, and Damien Chazelle is a talent, and what he does with kind of taking that kind of grounded. The music is happening kind of in the world. There's people stopped on the ramp and getting out of their cars in the middle of rush hour dancing. So it's like you have all this real world stuff that happens where they set these dance scenes that make it interesting visually too. So very highly nominated film and deserved most of those. Can't say anything bad about it. So what do you think of La La Land?
I'm with you. Musicals are not my favorite genre, but I remember seeing this film in the theater and I was quite impressed with it. The opening sequence, they shut down that freeway on ramp for like 2 days filming that sequence, which is amazing. The dance numbers were great. And Damien Chazelle, he normally teams up with the same guy that does his scores for his films. I don't
Mhm.
think this was an exception. And the music's great. As someone who's not a huge fan of musicals, I wasn't bored. I was entertained. And again, like you've touched on, at the end of the film, it's a realistic ending where it's a bummer in the way, but you've got two adults that have realized that they're going their separate ways, and there's a realism about it. And it's not a cheesy ending. It's a very adult ending, and it worked for me in that sense.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So moving on to epics and war related epic type films. You have a couple in this list. So if you
I
want to
sure
start
do. The
with
first one is David Lean's epic 1962's Lawrence of Arabia, which this film, I think, when you hear the term cinematic epic, this one's probably at the top of the list for a lot of people. Shot in Super Panavision 70. And every frame of this movie is gorgeous. The quality of the image is amazing. It's been restored several times, but the latest 4K restoration is just absolutely gorgeous. You can actually see the sparkles in the sand of the dunes from the sunlight. Maurice Jarre, I believe, is the one who did the score. Incredible score. Peter O'Toole is the lead. T.E. Lawrence, World War One. You get this issue too with Hollywood doing what they like to do, where they take white actors and then have them portraying other nationalities. And so in this case, you've got Alec Guinness playing an Arab character, and you've got Anthony Quinn, and he's got a prosthetic nose, which for the time is pretty good, but by today's standards, it's a little noticeable. You kind of let that go. And I think we've gotten in the habit over the years of Hollywood doing that we kind of let it go. And if the film's good enough, like Lawrence of Arabia is, you don't focus on little issues like that. But it's a remarkable film. You've got themes of identity and war, imperialism, and T.E. Lawrence is questioning his own country and their motives. And, we could probably go on for weeks talking about this film. I remember one shot in it where it's a wide vista shot with a camp of a lot of people, and you've got several fires throughout, and it's kind of dusk, but yet you can see all the fires. And this is made at a time when you see a bunch of horses and you see a bunch of camels and you see a bunch of actors in the frame. They're really there. There's no CG doubling. There's no CG animals in this. It's all on set. It must have been a monumental challenge to make this film. The cameras, the 70 millimeter cameras were huge and heavy. How they managed to move them the way they did for these shots is outstanding. And I doubt they filmed a lot in the heat, but it was a long shoot. So I'm sure they got some summer heat. And you got the logistics of sand and dust and these cameras with the film. And it's like, the fact they were able to make a film as well as they did in the elements that they shot in it just blows my mind. What comes to mind at your end?
Peter O'Toole is very special in this. And his characterization, I wouldn't want anybody else playing this role. He was so perfect in the casting. You can't separate this movie from him. A lot of people will say that David Lean got too big for himself and with doing all these broad scale stories, and that maybe he lost some of the humanity of the more intimate stories, but I don't think so. I mean, I think this one, just Lawrence and his ability to navigate the political situation and become this hero to these people that were not his people. And it's like he does become one of them in a sense. There's some of this in Dune actually too. This kind of idea of a outsider who is at heart, he is of their people. So, and I think he feels that way too. Like he's always been out of place his whole life. And
Hmm.
when he finally gets there, it's where he belongs and he makes a difference there. So it's these shots of, I remember the cut between blowing out the match and cutting to the desert.
Yeah.
You got all these shots of desert during the day, desert at night. You've got camels walking in the desert, and you know that okay, that take wasn't good. So what we got to do is okay, just brush the sand, let the wind blow it a little bit to kind of even it out, and
Yeah.
let's go again. It's like, what
Yeah.
do you do if they screw up the shot? So it's got to. You're right. It has to be so difficult to make a film like that, and it's definitely unique. And I don't mind as many shots of the desert as they want to show me, shots of the sun coming up and the rippling of the heat off the sand makes it kind of a guy off in the distance. You can barely see him, and the horizon line is again kind of shimmering from the heat until he comes into view. And just taking the time to let this guy ride towards you for a while before you make a cut. It's like you're there for that. It's not just a story at that point. You've got to soak in those images. So
Yeah, we could go on about it. It's sensational in every way. Cinematography, acting, the writing, the score, editing. It just all the elements came together with perfection.
right. So if that film though is too historical for you and you want to see epic type things, then for me, Gladiator would be that film that you should catch because maybe critically it wasn't as momentous in history of film as others, but among the population at large and the film lovers groups that vote on IMDb and so forth, Gladiator is a top 100 film. For me, again, it's so easy to revisit this one. I love the photography, the score, all the performances. Again, you got Hans Zimmer, you've got Lisa Gerrard of Dead Can Dance contributing to the score as well. Everything flowing together, the editing, that just you can't separate the way the music impacts you with the cutting and the shots. You know, when they tried to do a second Gladiator film, we knew they weren't going to have lightning strike twice. There's just no way you would capture all of that chemistry for all these elements again. And then, you've got a great heroic story, kind of a revenge story, but he also stood for something greater than just revenge because he was also seeking to take down the son who destroyed the image of Rome that he thought he was fighting for. Because Commodus was very much the common person who didn't really have these ideals of grandeur for the Republic. He really was about let's give them violence and entertain them with killing. And, I don't have to be a great ruler if I just keep them busy watching people kill each other in the arena. So,
Well, once again, Ridley Scott proves that he's a master of world building. And in this film, he takes us to ancient Rome. And The battle scene at the beginning of the film is incredible. Hundreds of extras. The Gladiator fight scenes are amazing. You touched on the score. We touched on Hans Zimmer tonight already. Hans Zimmer, I think he won an Oscar for this. And Lisa Gerrard's vocals, very beautiful, very haunting, just perfect. Works so well. Russell Crowe's great. I think he won an Oscar for Best Actor for
He did.
this. And the film won Best Picture. Unfortunately, it's one of those years they split and they gave Best Director to somebody else. I can't remember
Well,
who.
they kinda had no choice in this case. It was an amazing year for Steven Soderbergh because he had both
Mm,
Aaron Brockovich and Traffic.
okay.
So, it's pretty
Yeah.
rare that I mean, it's like if Spielberg directed Schindler's List and instead of Jurassic Park, Saving Private Ryan the same year. It's maybe
Yeah.
not quite that, but those are
Yeah.
both great films.
Well, Sir Ridley's still
It's a
waiting
hell
on
of a
his
performance.
Oscar.
Yeah, so, I mean, Ridley was just unlucky that he was up against something like that, because otherwise, I think it would have probably followed because that movie did not direct itself.
No, no. It's got a lot of testosterone, but it's also got a lot of heart. And you take the score like Hans Zimmer's kind of intense score, and then you balance it out with Lisa Gerrard's vocals, which brings the heart into the score. That's kind of like the picture. You got a lot of manly fighting, and then you've got a human tale at the same time. And then when we reach the end, when Maximus dies at the end of the film, and we see him go off to his wife and child.
In Elysia, remember?
Yeah,
Because Elysia is where all the heroes go to die. Right, he talked
yeah,
about it at the beginning that,
yeah.
when if you don't make it out of this battle when they unleashed hell, remember at the beginning? If you don't make it out of this battle, then you'll be welcomed in Elysia, so that's what you have going for you. So, before this film came out, it was told to me that Gladiator was better than Spartacus, and I was like, "Come on, this isn't gonna be better than Kubrick, come on." And, I think nowadays, I think people say, "Well, Kubrick was great, but Spartacus, he was working for hire. It's a great
Mhm.
film, but there's maybe something a little bit more that works for people today for Gladiator than Spartacus. So wasn't thinking I was ever gonna say that, but I have to.
I think it's true.
Right. So yeah, Gladiator to me was also a little bit of an answer to Saving Private Ryan in terms of like how to depict war. And so you have another war film that's somewhat epic in scope that is in your um
Yes.
30.
This would be Francis Ford Coppola's Apocalypse Now. I watch this film once or twice a year, and I'm still amazed that they didn't kill anybody making the film. You had your cast members on helicopters flying. You had your cast members on the beach as helicopters are coming down to land. Yeah, they filmed it in the Philippines, and they were using the Philippine Army's equipment and choppers. And there were points where the Philippine Army would take their choppers and have to go leave to go fight. And Coppola's and the crew, the cast and crew, are sitting there just waiting for the choppers to return. Um,
Well,
Before
they
I touch
almost
more,
killed Martin Sheen though, right?
is that true? I didn't know that.
I think he had a heart attack.
Well, yeah, I knew the heart attack, but I
Yeah.
didn't I thought maybe it was an issue with a
No,
helicopter or
I'm just
something.
referring to I'm not sure if it was something to do with the conditions of filming or whatever, but, yeah, there was a point where they weren't sure, I think, if they were gonna have a lead
Well,
actor for a while.
Martin Sheen, he was a heavy smoker at the time, and he was pounding the alcohol. In that scene at the beginning of the film where he's in the hotel room in Saigon, he was actually blitzed when they filmed that, and he actually punched the mirror and really cut himself. And so that wound and all that blood we see in that shot as he's, basically crying and laying off to the side of the bed before the troops come in to put him in the shower. That was all real performance under the influence. And incredibly effective. And you got a great supporting cast too with this movie. A young Lawrence Fishburne, who I think he lied about his age and he wasn't even 17. And so he said he was like 18 and he got hired even though he wasn't of age to really work on the film, and just an incredible supporting cast. And,
Recently,
the
when
kid,
Robert Duvall passed, there's mention of his inspiration for Colonel Kilgore from when he was in the military, so that there were guys that he remembered that swagger that they had, and that's what he tried to capture with his performance of Kilgore.
it's such a great performance from Robert Duvall. That beach scene where there's all these explosions going off and all he's focused on is the surf. And he's like, get out there, Lance, surf the shit, and the
Yeah,
famous.
actually, Milius's, fascination with surfing enters this film. It's kind of a strange detail that to juxtapose with all the stuff going on, but, I think some people actually kinda look down on the film for doing some of that because they're like most soldiers aren't doing that kind of stuff. I mean, they're not going to take those kinds of risks in battle. But I mean, I think it was a larger point they were trying to show was just that it was all kind of nuts,
Yeah,
and
the
that was the
chaos of war,
right.
the confusion of it all.
But I think some people kind of thought, well, this is just a little too California. It's like it's just Californians trying to make war to look like scoofing around or something. So it's kind of a criticism of the film in some ways, but I think it gives it an interesting texture, um, to kind of characterize the craziness that goes on.
And it was a challenging production. You know, you mentioned Martin Sheen with the heart attack, that delayed production. They had a monsoon that destroyed some of their sets. And then Marlon Brando shows up and doesn't know his lines and he's overweight. And Coppola had to work around that
The Philippine
remarkably so.
military taking their helicopters to go fly off and do some actual
Yeah,
work
that
at
that
times.
doesn't help either. And, Eleanor Coppola, Francis's late wife, made an incredible documentary, Hearts of Darkness: A Filmmaker's Apocalypse, about the making of the film. It's an extraordinary documentary, and she really doesn't hide, the chaos and the mindset that Francis was in at the time. And in fact, at one point, sticks a prop gun, could have been a real gun to his head, and basically says, "I don't know what I'm gonna do. I think I'm just gonna kill myself." That's kinda how low he got at points while making this movie. And, this is a guy who had already done Godfather 1 and 2, and here he is in the Philippines, and the process of filmmaking has got his emotional mental state to a point where he's thinking of contemplating killing himself.
Well,
It's
on that note, I mean, there's a couple of key points I wanted to talk about. You mentioned Heart of Darkness because that is the Joseph Conrad story that this is based on. So people that are too focused on how realistic the battle and the military aspects of it are, they're missing the point that this isn't supposed to be the reality of the Vietnam War and how it was fought. This is a telling of Hearts of Darkness, the story in a Vietnam setting, and it's about something deeper about the nature of human beings and the wildness, the animal natures. And as you peel away aspects of socialization, what you end up with is kind of like what you see when he arrives down the river in Marlon Brando's fortress of depravity, I guess.
yeah, heads on stakes.
Right. But this is what we can turn to if we are pushed far enough. And war does tend to do that. People think, well, a well behaved military, they're not going to rape, they're not going to steal, they're not going to do anything. It's like, okay, well, if you want to believe that, nice little fairy tale. But I think more often people say in war, everything goes. So it's you either win or all kinds of terrible things are going to happen to you. So anyway, that's what the story's about. So in a sense, I mean, Francis was trying to capture that essence in this movie, and I think he might have gone a little psychotic himself in the course of doing so. There's that, and then secondly, studios were certainly aware of what was going on because they're counting beans and they're seeing that everything's going crazy on the budget and the shooting schedule, and this was not supposed to be a way that worked. I think this film is the end of 70s filmmaking. At that point, the kids, Spielberg,
Mhm,
Coppola, Lucas, they had their fun and now they got to be brought a little bit more to heel and we're never going to let them just have an open checkbook again. So this was the end, I mean, of the 70s filmmaking and then things got a little bit more corporate after that.
mhm.
So,
Yeah, and one of the songs that's used a great use in the film, "The Doors, the End,"
mhm.
at the beginning and at the end, and then at the end, we got the brilliant cross-cutting between Willard killing Kurtz and then the locals killing that animal, which would never happen today.
I think it was
You
a
see
water
this.
buffalo.
Was it? Yeah. You
Yeah.
see it get killed on screen and it still horrifies me. But yeah, it was not a prosthetic creature. It was real. And somehow they managed to get away with that, I guess, partly because of where they were filming. But it's horrific. But, the concept of killing is horrific. And you've got one soldier killing another soldier, another fellow American, the evil man, evils of man against man, and the evils of war, and
Well,
how that.
when you're talking about war, you're talking about what is the greater evil. So when you're, again, trying to prevent being destroyed by an enemy who is going to take your freedom, this is what was being sold, at least as far as the domino theory of Vietnam. We can't have the communists take over our way of life. And what we're seeing in Ukraine is representative of what they're afraid of. I mean, that's a legitimate fear. You don't want to be Ukraine. I mean, it's terrible what's happening to people in Ukraine. We're not really even talking about it so much right now, what's happening there. But, that's not necessarily communism. That's just another side. When they attack you, this is what's going to happen. So there was a cold war, so to speak, between two superpowers, and they were fighting for who was going to prevail on what the world was going to be. And so, unleash the dogs of war, and the dogs of war doesn't discriminate on what it's going to do to win because it's all or nothing. So,
One last thought I have on Apocalypse Now is the cinematography. It's Vittorio, I
sure,
believe. Yeah, amazing.
yeah,
Absolutely incredible stuff.
yes,
Beautiful.
yeah. All right, so quickly, honorable mentions. You have three in the epic/war category. One is a western.
Yes, we've got Good, the Bad, the Ugly, Sergio Leone's spaghetti western with Clint Eastwood. Incredible cinematography, great score, great use of close-ups. That was something that Leone was really great at, and this film kind of kind of helped solidify Clint Eastwood as a movie star.
Well, the idea of the spaghetti western, it wasn't like heroes and villains so much. It was everything was kind of down and dirty. Clint Eastwood, is he the good? I mean, how good is he? Was anybody particularly any worse than any other? I mean, they're all out for a treasure reward. What we have in this one, at least, in comparison to the prior two films in the series, which are Fistful of Dollars for a few dollars more, both with Clint Eastwood, of course, is we have scope. So in this one, you get some shots of the Civil War battle across a river that takes place. So you have other things happening to give it scope while we really just have still a mission of a man trying to get a reward that other men are also seeking, a bit of a story of greed. In the midst of all that, you have obviously the music of Ennio Morricone tying it all together. So there's an Italianness to it that feels different than an American director doing a Western that purveys a lot of the elements of the film. So you also have bad dubbing at
Yes,
times
you
because the
do.
Italians did not record sound as they shot. And that was a thing they did quite a bit. So, but it's okay because we grew accustomed to it as we got to appreciate these films. So, for then your other two honorable mentions in the epic war department, what would they be?
We've got Spielberg's 1993 Schindler's List, which the amazing thing about this film is he shot Jurassic Park. He went off to Poland to shoot Schindler's List and basically left George Lucas in control of the post production on Jurassic Park. Black and white photography. I think his current DP was the one that shot this, Kaminsky, if I'm
Yeah,
not
he's been
mistaken.
working with him ever since.
Yeah, amazing stuff. You know, you got one bit of color in the film, which is the girl in the red. I think it was a red coat, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think it was a dress. I think it was a coat. Ray Fiennes does an amazing job as German Nazi soldier. You got John Williams doing a score that's just a heartbreaker, and a great performance from Liam Neeson too, which really kind of raised his bar, I think, in terms of performance. And Spielberg doesn't hesitate to show the horrors of war and the horrors of the Nazis. And, it earns its R rating. It's a remarkable film. It's not a film I can watch very often just because it's so intense and so heavy and such a downer. But I think Spielberg's intention too was that we cannot forget our history. And at the same time, we can't forget the heroes that come forward at a time of horror in history.
Right.
What are your thoughts about it?
Yeah, I mean, that year it came out, everybody just anointed it as one of the greatest films ever made. There are certain aspects of it that certainly deserve that. I think its critical reception at this point is it's not the top tier for Spielberg, but it's certainly up there because obviously the self-important subject matter. Some people do think he actually turns away a little bit. Some people look at the red dress as being a little bit of a sentimental thing because okay, why this one particular girl in a red dress that when her body then shows up later dead in the pile of bodies. I mean, what makes her any worse than anybody else that died? But, also they got to the gas chambers in one scene and they got water instead of gas when they got to Auschwitz. So a lot of people didn't get just to take a shower. So, but, on the other hand, you've got Ray Fiennes indiscriminately just shooting people for target practice when he gets up in the morning. You've got people that are shot in the street just for looking the wrong way. And the way that people die in this movie, you almost feel like that it's a documentary. So here we're going handheld and getting a lot of the sense that real death is happening. And so there's no Hollywood artifice involved here. So that's where I think, all the credit that he's getting for the film that people showered on him at the time, it is deserved. You're right. It's a hard watch. It's not something I like to go back and rewatch a lot, but there's still some aspects to it that when Schindler does break down and say, I could have saved more people,
Mhm.
I'm moved by that. That's tough.
Yeah.
He's got money. Yeah, he was a self interested industrialist. He was getting cheap labor, but he found that that wasn't necessarily his guiding principle all the way through, that there was a second motive that he had to keep kind of hidden to get away with it. And it was a great thing for those people. So look at the final shot. I mean, unlike with Saving Private Ryan, I think the bookends of Saving Private Ryan don't work very well, but the bookends of this one, when the real people actually go and put their stones on the grave, I think
Mhm.
that's genuine. That's the real deal.
Absolutely. Yep.
So I can't knock this film. It's too hard to watch the stone cold absolute reality all the way through. I think you want to get as big of an audience to go see it as possible. I think there are some films that have come out since then that are a little bit worse in what they show, and I don't think as many people notice them. So I think he threaded the needle perfectly here.
And then 5 years later, he directs his World War II epic, Saving Private Ryan, and same DP as Schindler's List, and I think this film's probably best known for its opening sequence with the landing on the beach in Normandy and the horror that occurred with those troops arriving by sea, basically many of them just being, targets, and Spielberg, doesn't hesitate with the gore, and the sound design is amazing, the violence, the carnage. And I think it takes about 20 minutes, give or take, of screen time. So it's a big chunk of the film. But I've heard people talk, those that survived that day, had seen the film, said it was a pretty accurate representation of what they endured. Another perfect example of the horrors of war and the horrors of what occurs in the process of battle. And then we get into this. Go ahead.
Yeah, soldiers that see it that I've known, they just say flat out, this is the most realistic depiction of what it's like to be in a battle, period. That it makes them sweat and have, PTSD from what they've gone through, that it's just so visceral. And getting into Tom Hanks' head in that scene when you get some of the slow mo shots and the distorted audio and everything, the entire design of that sequence at the beginning in D-Day it's almost too much to handle. And there are other battle sequences later that are tough. The sniper sequence,
Mm,
the attack on where the German kills the Jewish soldier, that bothered me for a couple of weeks after I saw the film the first time, because we're trained in watching movies a lot of times that, that they're fighting over a knife and somehow they're going to block it, and they're somehow going to get out of the situation. But in this situation, it doesn't happen. You see that knife slowly go into that guy, and you watch him slowly, just the life go out of him. And the German guy who's doing it, it's almost like it's more intimate even than having sex with somebody. I mean, it's like he's taking this guy's life, and it's just so dirty and
mhm,
just icky, the whole psychology of the moment, that it really bothered me. But yet again, if we're looking for truth, sometimes we got to look at the harsh, disturbing reality of things. And yeah, I don't want to revisit this movie a lot because
mhm.
it's something that I find very distressing. But it has its purpose, because anybody that says they want to see, the country go to war again or something, I would say, come on, this is the kind of stuff that happens, and we're not looking to give psychopaths a reason to do their bidding on our boys. It's like, why would you want to wish this on any country to go through this unless you absolutely have no other choice? All diplomacy has failed. I think that is where this film has great value. So I don't put it as a favorite, but I feel like there's a very important purpose that a popular entertainment can have by having this stuff be depicted.
I think from a technical standpoint, it's Spielberg at his best, especially that opening sequence with the attack on Normandy. The visual effects work, makeup effects, sound design, camera work. It's just it came together so well and so believable. And It's remarkable cinema, and he won the Oscar for Best Director, although the film didn't win for Best Picture. I can't
Yeah, there
remember.
are some issues with the film in parts. I mean, the script's a little bit loose. Shakespeare in Love is a fantastic screenplay. Tom Stoppard wrote it. I mean, there's not many that can get away with writing Shakespearean language. And it's a fine film. It gets behind a lot of things that artistic people care about, which is inspiration for art. And Saving Private Ryan is its main function is to show a really dirty, horrible aspect of life in all of its ugliness. So I could see why people say, I want to split this one. I don't want to be a downer for everybody out there. Let's give them something that inspires them instead of something that's just so harsh. But again, it's this film is the one that everyone will remember from that year
Mhm.
more so. I'm not going to slam the Academy because that means Shakespeare in Love's not a terrible film like sometimes they've done. But I'm not going to say they got it wrong per se. But it depends on what you want to give your award for.
And Harvey Weinstein really pushed Shakespeare in Love.
Okay,
I
we can
think
look
he
at that in a revisionist way and say, yeah, such an asshole, ended up
Yeah.
getting his picture, the Oscar, because of his campaigning. But
I
I mean,
wonder how many
there's plenty of other people who've
people
campaigned before and have convinced people to vote in ways that maybe they shouldn't have.
well, Harvey was, from what I've heard, was a pretty, intense promoter, and, we'll just leave it at that.
Right. So other things that he does are worse than that, though. So I'm not going to
Of
worry
course.
about urging people to give a film an award versus the other things that he was doing to people. So allegedly. Just so we don't get sued.
Allegedly. Right.
But I mean, he was convicted. A jury has said so. All right. So on a lighter note, sometimes people like their war stuff with some humor involved. And so on my list of my favorite films, I wanted to pick a comedy. There's plenty of comedies that I like a lot that could easily be in my top 30. But I wanted to pick the one that I feel is one of the best made films as a comedy too, because I respect that as well as something that makes me laugh. So I picked MASH. You have Robert Altman's style all over it. I haven't picked any other Altman films. What I really love about his style is you want to talk about things that are conversational and feel like you're really hearing real conversation. How about this? You mic a bunch of actors and you don't tell them what you're going to end up keeping in the cutting room. You just say, you talk about this, you talk about that. Here's your script. Maybe you can go off script and we're going to just mic everyone and then we'll figure out who we're going to raise in the mix and who we're going to put in the background. You got that all over this movie. It is such an entertaining thing hearing these little comments coming in from all over the place, and some of them are pretty funny and here and there. And um, meanwhile, you've also got a anti-authoritarian fantasy. I was just saw this film with a friend a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about, is this film really a realistic depiction of the military? It's kind of like, well, yes and no. It's like there is some of this rigidity about things that some people have, and then there are some people that maybe want to push back on that. Do they normally get away with it? Probably not. But here what we have is doctors, and if anybody's going to get away with something, a doctor is going to get away with it because a lot of people will respect the doctor. He's going to save those kids' lives. I mean, we got to put up with his shit because if Johnny comes in here and he's got a bullet wound in his neck, who's going to save him? So, so in that regard, you can kind of give it a little bit of credibility that maybe a doctor would get away with some of this, but it has some interesting commentary about, again, there's a religion involved. You've got Robert Duvall's character here again, bringing up our recently departed gem of an actor, playing this character who uses his religion as a way to sort of act like he's better than everybody and to shame people for things that were maybe not their fault because I don't know, he's just kind of a bitter person. And I feel like the film kind of mocks that. I don't think it's necessarily people might think, oh, this film's just mocking religion. I'm like, well, but aren't there some people who are religious that deserve to be mocked because of the way they treat other people, how they're better than them because they're wearing their religion on their sleeve? I don't think that's really following the tenets of the religion to act that way. I think you're
Mhm.
supposed to keep it to yourself more. Your belief is your belief. Don't try to like make other people take them down because you're holier than thou. So at other places, the father, who's part of the unit, he's looked at very favorably. I mean, he seems to be a very genuine person. And there are times and places where obviously he's at the wrong place at the wrong time and it creates a nice joke. But at other points, I mean, like when they're in the operating theater and they said, "Can you please help me hold this clamp?" And he's trying to do last rites. And they said, "Well, Father, that's fine, but this guy's still alive and that guy's dead. Could you help us save this guy?" So, I mean, I don't think they're necessarily mocking his religion. They're just saying, let's put some things into perspective. Like, we do have to keep in mind those types of things in our spiritualism, but not necessarily at at the expense of other things. So those are some thoughts about MASH and about why I think it's a great film that probably has gone down a few notches in its esteem now to some others, but I think is a really good 70s comedy with some of the values that were there in the 70s that made films interesting.
It must be the way you described, initially, the way in which they shot the film with ad-libbing and kinda letting the actors just talk over each other, and then they pieced it together in the editing process. That's gotta be a really freewheeling and creative way to work, where you don't necessarily have to follow the script and, you could kinda wing it and not worry about cutting each other off, during the performance.
Right. Okay. So other arguably comedies. Some of these
Mhm.
are comedy dramas or dramas with comedy elements, but I put them in comedy because I think the Golden Globes would call all of these comedies.
I think so. Yeah,
so,
definitely.
so go ahead and talk about briefly your list of comedy elements in this category.
Sure. So I'm going to start with George Lucas's 1973 American Graffiti. This is a film that got him on the map as a filmmaker, certainly in the world of success. THX 1138 didn't do all that well, but still a great achievement. But American Graffiti, Lucas was influenced by his younger years, his teenage years in the 50s, growing up in Modesto, California. Lucas is also a car fanatic. He loves cars and race cars. So he had a chance to explore some of his loves: cruising, cars, classic rock and roll music from that era. And that's what he brought about with this film. And he cast some unknowns at the time that went on to have some pretty amazing careers, one of which was Ronnie Howard, and Harrison Ford was also in it. Your pre-Indiana Jones Harrison Ford, and pre-Han Solo. So that's one of my comedy picks. Do you want to touch on American Graffiti at all?
Richard Dreyfuss was in it too, and he makes it fun. It is fun watching Harrison Ford pre Star Wars and pre Apocalypse Now. At that point in his career, the sense of 50s-ness that he's able to capture, shot in the 70s is fresh. So yeah, I think he captured the elements that he's looking for very well in that one.
So then I'm going to jump to Back to the Future, Robert Zemeckis' 1985 film with Michael J. Fox, and I think one of the great things about this film is the screenplay. It's got a really tight screenplay. Bob Gale was at least one of the writers on it, and it's just a fun ride. Every time I see it, I have to sit down and check it out. You got a great performance by Christopher Lloyd, great musical score. Was it Alan Silvestri that he
Yeah,
used
that
on
was
this
Alan
one?
Silvestri.
Yeah, and then great music too by Huey Lewis and the News. They were kind of at their peak at that time. Crispin Glover, as quirky as he is, he does a great job playing George McFly, Michael J. Fox's father, and time travel, obviously a big part of the film. But the other part of the film is family and
Sometimes family's a little too close though when your mom's trying to hit on you.
yeah, yeah.
So
That that was a little
that was a
that was a little
sticky element.
creepy,
Yeah.
but still quite funny and very entertaining. From a writer's standpoint, do you have any comments about the screenplay?
It's tight. I respect the cleverness of it. I think Christopher Lloyd kind of steals every scene he's in. I think
He
Michael J.
does.
Fox is great to follow in it, and I think they were right to probably recast Eric Stoltz. I don't think he would have had the levity to carry this one. I mean, it is a light movie. It's fun. Spielberg was churning these kinds of things out as a producer that he didn't really want to do as a director. I think he was kind of moving on to more serious stuff at that time. He did Color Purple shortly after that. So, Empire of the Sun, which, great films, but, light years away from what this film is trying to do. But let me tell you something, like, I'm not sure why this comedy is so revered on best of lists in places like Letterboxd and IMDb. It's just people put this really high up there. And maybe it's the fact that you're blending the sci-fi genre with comedy and you're doing it in a way that doesn't insult either side. It's very rare to get where you pull off both parts of it. So yeah, what you're saying is a lot of that is script. So it's a fun series too. The couple of sequels aren't bad. They kind of carry that forward when you go into the future about his messed up son, and that's played by him as well, Michael J. Fox. But the first one definitely is the best. So if I was to pick one, that would be it.
Same here. The sequels, they're okay, but they didn't really do it for me the way the original did. The original's got so much charm. It's a very charming film. Moving on from there, let's talk about real quickly Pulp Fiction, Tarantino's 1994 film that got him on the map and got him his first Oscar. Very entertaining film, comedic, dramatic, quirky characters, some shocking elements as we discover near the end of the film. It's a film that brought back Travolta when his career was kind of a little bit slow and reinvigorated his acting prowess. Tarantino, in my opinion, he's great with creating really interesting characters, and Pulp Fiction's certainly no exception. He's also really good at incorporating a lot of characters and allowing us to get to know these characters in a 2-hour film. And I think we experienced that with Pulp Fiction. What are your thoughts about it?
Well, its structure is very inventive because when you get to the end of the movie, you realize that you've already gone past the time point when the end occurs. And what you have is um, kind of a story of fate that has been told in a very fun and loose kind of way. But it's very important to understand as you walk out of the theater that the choice that was made at the point that that coincidence happened. And here again, we have a kind of a spiritual religious moment where even these low life gangster types who go around basically killing people to fulfill their bosses agenda, that they can be touched by something at the right moment and sort of move off in another direction. And that's what happens with Samuel Jackson's character. And Travolta's character doesn't. He doesn't see it. He just says, "Nah, it just happened. Those bullets not hitting you. I don't see anything in that. That's nothing." So there's also what's in the briefcase. Some people have speculated it's Marcellus's soul, and that they're buying it from these guys, and this glowing thing in the box, the MacGuffin of the story, which is, if you get into the structure of storytelling, the MacGuffin is the item that everybody is going after. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be the Maltese Falcon, or it could be uranium for a bomb, or whatever it is. This MacGuffin is probably Marcellus's soul, if that theory is correct. So, but in the midst of all this, he makes it just fun to talk about. This is just, a little bit of philosophy that he's just toying around with us as a screenwriter. He's just throwing a lot of things at the wall. But the real thing, like you say, is the entertaining aspect. He makes it fun. It's Pulp Fiction. It's not, it's not high art, but somehow it ends up kind of feeling a little bit that way because it's so intricately woven that it elevates the form of Pulp Fiction into something approaching high art. And yes, it is really funny. And yeah, you can also be offended by it, but sometimes the things that are the most shocking are the funniest things. So, I mean, Quentin Tarantino bitching about the coffee that his wife buys, and he doesn't need to be told that the coffee he's giving these guys is good. What he needs to know is that the kid that got his head blown off in their car is not sitting in his garage. And that's what he needs to know, is that he's not going to be there when his wife gets home. So, the humor of that situation in the midst of all this pretty disgusting kind of stuff. This poor guy got his head blown off just because they hit a bump and Travolta was not holding his gun correctly and it shot him. So
Mhm.
created a big mess for everybody. So but yeah, I mean, there's a reason why some people went back in the theater, I think, and saw this film more than 10 times because they just never seen anything quite like this and they just had to revisit it as much as they could. Moving on now to my honorable mentions. Mine are Amelie, Big Lebowski, Blazing Saddles, and Tootsie. And if you want to talk about a list of films that couldn't be more different, even though they're all sort of comedies, comedy dramas, what have you. One is the most French thing you can imagine. It's so stereotypically French that's one of the reasons why I like it so much. So a lot of people, when they give their best of the top 20, last 25 years, Amelie is definitely on there. It's so stylishly directed. It's definitely one of the best made comedies. The only reason why I didn't put it above MASH on my favorites list is just that it's kind of niche, because it's so much this French kind of comedy, but very amusing and very visually creative. Big Lebowski, of course, is a noir film that is making fun of such films. Basically, Jeff Bridges, the dude, is one of the great comedic characters of the last 30, 40 years. I mean, this guy just kind of floats through everything. He has no real direction, but when somebody damages his rug, is hell bent on getting some recovery for it because it tied the room together so well. And so he got confused for the other Lebowski, who's a rich guy with a young lady who is trying to, I think, take advantage of him by setting up this kidnapping, if I remember the plot correctly, because it's really not about the plot. It's really all about the dude and his buddies trying to figure out how they're going to deal with the situation because the dude wants to get paid for his rug and he's going to try to help resolve this mystery. The people forget how funny the Coens are sometimes. I think they feel like they're kind of, when they get into No Country for Old Men mode, they're kind of very serious and things are very dire. Fargo, Raising Arizona, this film, they are funny. So they really have two equally good modes. And at first I thought Fargo was the film that I was going to hold in higher esteem. But as I continued on over the years, I kind of ended up coming back to this film a little bit more, even though I really love Fargo. I mean, from the Midwest, you have to kind of love Fargo. You see all these people in the Midwest and Fargo, you know who they are. They capture that very well. But Jeff Bridges really, and all the other cast. I mean, Sam Elliott with his narration, just again, very dry, but it's hilarious. So, so what do you think about Lebowski?
Can't say enough about Jeff Bridges and the supporting cast, Steve Buscemi, John Goodman. And then even though his role's really brief, John Turturro is the Jesus.
My God.
Oh my God. Talk about stealing the scene.
Oh my God.
It's
Yeah.
just
it's
hilarious.
It's so disturbingly funny.
Yeah.
What he does with that character is like, ew. And I gotta say, the part where they try to give Donnie's ashes to the Malibu coastline and the wind blows the wrong direction and they end up covered in his ashes. And Jeff Bridges' expression is just like, you asshole, why did you do that? So anyway.
And another bit part that was good in a very subtle way was the late Philip Seymour Hoffman, who's kind of an assistant to the rich Lebowski. He has 2 or 3 scenes in the film, and he has a great reaction to a sequence where he's escorting the dude out of the house, out of the mansion, and Lebowski's young wife is there poolside, and she makes a proposition to Lebowski, and then Philip Seymour Hoffman gives this hilarious laugh, which is just very memorable. It's a great scene. It's a fun film. It's a very fun film.
Okay, so Blazing Saddles. I do agree this film could never be made today. That's unfortunate. It is offensive if you want to look at it a certain way, but it's making a point as it's doing this. So the people that are the racists in this film are the people who are being mocked. There are probably a great number of people who see this film who don't get that because they think that all that racist stuff is really funny. Well, those people who aren't getting it are the people who are being mocked as well. So I think actually Richard Pryor, who contributed to the script, was the one telling Mel Brooks, you need to actually go further. And Mel Brooks says, okay, I will. So definitely one of the laugh a minute funniest movies ever made, up there with Airplane in that regard.
Absolutely.
But it does have that additional element, that feeling of danger about it, that you can't do this kind of thing. But at that point you could. And if you're going to turn your PC machine and your brain off, go watch it and see for yourself. And don't let other people tell you to avoid it just because they can't do that.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Your turn. I
was going to say, I agree with you about the fact that unfortunately a big studio would never touch a film like this today. And that's tragic. I recently Googled and learned that Richard Pryor was part of the writing process on the screenplay, and I hadn't known that before. So that's really a fascinating tidbit to learn that Richard Pryor was involved in the process. One of the famous scenes is the fireside beans farting scene. And I think this was probably one of the first films that I saw as a young kid that incorporated farting in a movie, and probably has done it better than anything else I've seen since then.
Yeah, and
it's just terrific.
They went all the way with that. I mean, it goes on for a long time. I mean, kind of like Robocop, the guy getting shot by Ed 209 going on too long. That bean scene was just endless farts just going off, and it gets ridiculous. You're like, what the hell? It's like, come on.
Sometimes more is more
Yes, and that was one.
and worth it.
Absolutely. And then on a much more subtle note, Tootsie touches on the humor that people have had from, just for ages, people have had fun with the idea of cross dressing, and Some Like It Hot really did it well. One of the funniest movies ever made, easily could make the list of favorites. But I went with Tootsie because the romance that he has with Jessica Lange's character in that movie it really is effective to me, that they pull off the dramatic aspect of that and the difficulty of that situation where, at one point she's kind of attracted to him even though she thinks he's a woman, and she doesn't want to go there, and it touches on all those things about fluidity that a lot of people that are younger than we are much more open about accepting. Our generation, of course, was not raised that way so much in certain communities, at least. There are some communities I think it was, but not in mine. I don't seek out issues that deal with homosexuality in film, but films that address it in a way that is thoughtful, I do respond to it. So I can appreciate it. But this film is not really about that. That's just a subtext of a couple of scenes, and it's really more about him. He even says it himself, I became a better man as a woman than I was when I was just a man. So it's like he learned
Mhm.
some things about himself, and he learned some things about being the other sex by putting himself in that situation. Yeah, even though it has a little fun with the gender bending kind of sex stuff here and there,
Mhm.
it's not really about that. I appreciate its thoughtfulness though in addressing those things well.
Full of small performances to point out. Bill Murray as the roommate of Dustin Hoffman's character.
Absolutely. Kills every
Yeah.
scene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the actor who played the Jessica Lange's father in the
Yeah, Charles
film,
Durning was really good. But going
Charles
back to Bill
Durney.
Murray, there's a
Yeah.
scene where he comes in and George Gaines's older character has been coming after Dustin Hoffman,
Yeah.
and Bill Murray's like there going like, "What's happened here?" And
Mhm.
so when George Gaines's character leaves, that's when Bill Murray confronts Dustin Hoffman. He's like, "What the hell is this guy doing in our apartment?" He's like, "He was out there singing." And he's like, was that good a singer? Just the deadpan lines that Bill Murray throws at him. I mean, he again steals every scene, and
Isn't there a line where he calls him a slut?
yeah, actually, it's right there. He right when he leaves, he goes, "You slut." So,
Great
yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
Great stuff. And behind the scenes, Dustin Hoffman has always been known to be kind of a perfectionist on set and argue, with his coworkers and director. And I guess he and Sidney Pollack bumped heads quite a bit on this film. But,
The film
it was
actually makes
certainly,
fun of that aspect of his persona. Actually, yeah,
does it?
yeah,
Okay.
because like that's what makes him where he's unhireable is that he's too difficult to work with.
That's funny. Yeah. Good point. Good point. Yeah. It's a great film. A lot of fun.
Yeah, great writing. Like, you just wish that scripts would be that well written and just every nuance is so well thought out. It's so I really respect that as a writer myself that when I see something like that, I just want to call that out. So,
Hmm.
all right, so now we're getting into the last section of our exploration of our favorites. And we're going to hit 3 sci-fi films and then there's one unclassifiable that we're going to leave viewers with. So, let's start with the 3 sci-fi films. One of them is
Okay.
on both of our lists. And actually, Matt,
It is.
now you can actually tell people what your top 5 are because you haven't this was your 5th film on your top 5. So what are your top 5,
So
Matt?
the top five: Alien, Blade Runner, Raiders of the Lost Ark, LA Confidential, and David Cronenberg's Videodrome. And this would have to be my favorite David Cronenberg film. Actually came out the same year as The Dead Zone.
Amazing, isn't
Amazingly,
it?
he busy year, yeah. But two amazing films in the same year. We've got a great score by Howard Shore. I'm pretty sure he did the score on this one.
Yeah.
Really grisly and creepy makeup effects, special effects by Rick Baker, and Videodrome definitely lives up to David Cronenberg's nickname of the Baron of Blood. And his films are he's known for his body horror films. Let's see. Deborah Harry plays the female lead. James Woods plays the
Hold on.
male
Debbie
lead.
Harry
Yeah.
of Blondie, folks.
Yeah, I know,
Acting.
right?
Yes, right.
Yeah. And she did a great job.
Absolutely.
She did a really good job in this film. So, it touches on a lot of interesting subject matter. Obviously, you got a sci fi element. You got a an S&M element to it. You've got a reality versus non-reality. There's a point where Max Wren puts on a helmet, so you almost have this kind of virtual reality type aspect to the film. And
This was in the early 80s.
it
I
was
mean,
83.
getting into how video and interfacing with technology, how it changes human beings at this point, this was very insightful to predict that this is where we were going. And using video cassettes that you put into a person, whether again this actually is happening in the world or just is what the person's perceiving, is again left to the viewer to decide. It works both ways, but it works even better when it's probably in their imagination. But that you can actually control someone by putting this video element into them to where they start running a program. So this is kind of where we are now, folks. Like, how much are we putting in our brain, just doom scrolling, plugging all this information in, getting affected by it, whether we know it or not, just by sheer exposure? I mean, this is what he was predicting in the early 80s.
Hmm. Yeah, the famous quote, "The medium is the message." This film brings new meaning to that.
It's brilliant. I mean, the thing is there's nothing. I mean, Cronenberg, this is his thing anyway, is how technology affects the biological entity, the human being. So
Hmm.
this is in a lot of his films. The Fly has that.
Brood, to
Yeah,
some extent,
Scanners as
existence.
well. Yeah, I mean, there's
Yeah.
this is his theme. But this is the strongest one because this is the one that was so prescient that we're living it now, and this is why it put it on my favorites list. Is just arguably this kind of material is B movie material, but this is a highly regarded film among critics. This is, I think, in the 200s now, maybe of all time. I mean, it's deservedly so because people recognize that he's tapping into something in this film that needed to be addressed, and probably more people should be paying attention.
Yeah, and it's certainly not a film everybody is gonna enjoy. Like, every now and then joke that I'm gonna show it to my mother, and she would watch 2 minutes and be done. It's a specialty film for people that can handle it because 'cause it's got some pretty, intense subject matter.
Yeah, I'm not going to recommend this to everyone. I'm going to recommend it to people that really want to be challenged and just follow through the themes with it. I mean, some people may be grossed out by some of the gore effects, and Cronenberg does not shy away from it. And that's
No.
that's the entertainment factor that he tries to do. He thinks his audience is more into that kind of ick factor. And but the thing is, he also wants to smuggle these themes in
Mhm.
that are important to him artistically. And and it's like this is truth in a sense of what's happening. So that is why it's revered by people who look past the disgust aspects. That I'm not a huge fan of those kinds of effects myself. I mean, there are some films that have it that I like The Thing, Alien, but it's the themes that bring me back to this film. I would never have seen this film again if it wasn't about what it's actually about.
Yeah, it's Cronenberg's masterpiece.
Yeah, I would say so. So the next two films in sci-fi, the first one is mine, Abre los Ojos, which translates to Open Your Eyes. This was remade as Vanilla Sky with Tom Cruise, which is a far inferior film because Abre los Ojos is completely nailed. So it deals with a lot of the same things that The Matrix is talking about, but it does it in a different way. It deals with virtual reality. In this case, it's when something happens to where maybe they feel like the life that they have isn't worth living, they can go and escape into virtual reality. And maybe I should have said spoiler alert here because um, this is a very twisty movie, and it takes a while before you figure out that that is what's going on. It's a guy who has everything going for him. He's very good looking. He's able to take his friend's girlfriend and get her, to come with him because he's got that charm, he's got the looks and everything. And then the wrong girl that he's screwed over decides that she's gonna basically let him have it for what he's done to her by dropping her, and he gets into an accident that damages his face. So suddenly he doesn't have all this capability anymore, and he feels like his life is over. Now we don't know for sure that happens for a while because there's a process that happens in the story where he thinks that he's had his face redone and now he can go out and have the life that he thought that, that he could continue to have before he got into the accident. But then he starts having these psychotic episodes where his reality starts crumbling. So, and he's not sure, is it I'm losing my mind? Is somebody trying to play tricks on me? Did the girl that did this to me, is she around still playing games with me? I mean, there's a while that you're just basically not sure what's happening in this story. So the way that Cameron Crowe takes it into Vanilla Sky, he's trying to do something different with the material, and he's trying to do something I think that deals with stardom in a way that just it changes what the movie's really about too much to make it really work. Anyway, Tom Cruise obviously loved this film so much that not only did he remake it, he also got the director's next film made with his wife, then wife Nicole Kidman, which was called The Others, and a lot of people probably know that film better than this one. But this is a really skilled movie in its execution. It's so grounded. It's my favorite kind of story, again, that the speculative fiction that near future science fiction can explore, that deals with the human condition and comments on the truth of our humanity. This film has that completely. Go ahead.
Well, I've not seen it, but based on what you're discussing here, I got to add it to my list and hopefully see it here within a short time period. I did see Cameron Crowe's American remake, and it didn't do much for me. Although I got to give him credit. There's that sequence where Tom Cruise is driving his Mustang in Manhattan, in the middle of Manhattan, and they managed to do it where there weren't any people around. Oh, and it was pretty fascinating imagery.
That's how this film opens too.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
It's in
Okay.
Madrid, though, I think, instead of
Okay.
New York City. Spanish film.
Very good. Very good.
Now, your next film is one of the granddaddy of all films, both in its impact at the time on the audience of the 60s and in everything in science fiction that has come after it. It is considered
Yes.
by many to be the best film ever made. Many film directors that are our favorites now view it as a huge influence. There was a recent poll on the They Shoot Pictures, Don't They website that it was voted by far by the most people in the poll to be the best film. They're in their list of 25 favorite films. It made, like, I think 25% of the people that voted picked this movie as one of their top 25. So, Matt, go into it. 2001.
Well, that film is 2001, Stanley Kubrick's science fiction masterpiece from 1968, and this film is just a spectacle in all ways. Here's a film that was made nearly a decade before Star Wars. He hired Douglas Trumbull to assist with creating the amazing visual effects that were necessary for the film. Shot it on 65 millimeter, I believe, as opposed to 70 millimeter, but still had that huge image size. So you have this amazing clarity with every shot in the film. Themes in the film, you have evolution of man, you have creation, you have the advancement of technology and AI technology. And as many people know, the HAL 9000 goes a little batty and kills one astronaut and nearly kills another. And we're at a time near here in the 2026 of the 21st century where AI is becoming a very common part of our lives, and governments are rushing to be the first to create the quantum supercomputer and AI that can do everything that we need it to do. And James Cameron, famous for the Terminator, recently talked about how he warned all of us, but we didn't take heed. And back in the 80s. And so getting back to 2001, just like Lawrence of Arabia, it's one of those films where you could literally just talk about it endlessly for days or weeks. Remarkable photography, breakthrough with visual effects, the sets they built, like they was famous for this rotating gimbal for spaceship where they were able to have a camera moving within the set. So as the actors moved, the camera would move. And it's just like Lawrence of Arabia, there's so many beautiful shots. Almost every frame of the shot is eye candy. And it's remarkable. I know the younger generation might find it as slow and meandering, but these kids today are too used to these Marvel films where everything's cut so quick. You can barely get a break in, but this film's a masterpiece. What are your thoughts about it?
Yeah, I mean, only reason why I didn't put it into my favorites list, if I had to vote on one of the greatest films ever made, I would put it on there. But it does feel kind of portentous to get through at times. The Starfield scene at the end goes on way too long. Some of the staticness of some of the shots. I understand he actually trimmed it after it originally was shown. Critics are pretty hard on it, saying I mean, it's like watching paint dry. So they cut some time out of it, and I'm sure it's better for it, but it's still pretty tough sometimes. It soothes you actually. I mean, this is Kubrick who isn't afraid to show you some in your face stuff. I mean, look at A Clockwork Orange, but this film is very sanitized in a lot of ways, and that's one reason why it feels so. The future in it feels very crisp and clean and sanitized. So the characters feel that way as well. The HAL is actually the HAL 9000 is the most sinister character in the movie.
Yeah.
So that being said, though, I mean, obviously the landmark imagery that it had, the significance of the themes that and the visuals for people going to see it in the 60s. I mean, the rumors were lots of people would trip to it,
Mhm.
and the visuals were able to, especially the light show and the star field was something that people would just be like, oh wow, you know. So you know that was one person's way of having a spiritual connection to this movie, was to use the hallucinogenic path, which is certainly not my path. But on the other side of the spiritual spectrum, this is a film that's basically contemplating, are we the product of an extraterrestrial intelligence that uplifted us and is uplifting other species throughout the universe? So before everybody goes, oh, okay, this is about aliens changing human beings and all this kind of stuff, think about this. If you're even talking about the idea of God, God is not a person, God is an entity of some form. We learn in our religion that it's an omnipresent, or we can say he, or some people will say she, is an omnipresent, omnipotent being. And if it's not of the earth and it's not human, it's by its very nature, it has to be alien to us, because Earth is just Earth, and the rest of the universe is the rest of the universe. So this entity is bigger than all of us. So the monolith, which many religious people point out, has the dimensions of the squares of 1, 2, 3. It's 1 by 4 by 9. They're saying, well, that signifies the Trinity. I don't think that's an accident. I do think that's what is the reference is that this entity is, first it shows at the beginning uplifting the apes to humans, teaching them how to use tools. If you need more tips on this, you can watch the sequel, which tries to make things a little more overt. I understand Kubrick told Arthur C. Clarke when writing the script, I don't want to overwrite this stuff. I want to leave some of this for viewers to take from it what they will. But in the more overwritten sequel, which is based on a book written by Arthur C. Clarke, which I have read, and it does a very adequate job of depicting what Arthur C. Clarke wanted to convey. The element of what happens in that story is the same thing that happens in 2001, which is the creatures that are on Europa that are under the ice that are shown in 2010 at midpoint in the movie. When Jupiter is then transformed into a second sun in the solar system, it is to melt the ice and have those creatures be uplifted the same way humans were in the first movie. So the writer of 2001 is saying that this is happening all over the universe. In this case, there's two examples in our solar system. So this entity is uplifting species everywhere. So this is a spiritual, scientific, spiritual exploration of the evolution of humans and the evolution of maybe other beings elsewhere. And we now believe, of course, there is probably life somewhere else, even if it hasn't been here to visit us. So this is what this film is really about. And this is why people revere it so much, is that at that time, when it wasn't probably the most popular perspective to be talking about in more dogmatic Christian cultures, but it's basically saying the same thing as what religion is saying. It's just saying it in a different way. So
Mhm.
we can embrace that as just a different point of view of the same thing that so many people go to Sunday worship about, and it's happening through a secular explanation.
Yeah, I think you've touched on it brilliantly. It raises some really fascinating ideas. And, I kind of like the idea of humanity being created by aliens. And, you see some hieroglyphics in the ancient Egypt world and artwork in other cultures, ancient cultures, and you see what look like alien visitors to these cultures. And it kind of makes you wonder.
Yeah, I mean, that's more of the exploration of what, for instance, was being shown in Prometheus, where you've got these humanoid like beings that are dumping the DNA into the waters of the earth, and those end up evolving into us. That's a little bit more of a chariots of the gods kind of theory of that kind of alien interaction. And I think this movie's not trying to do that. I think that Kubrick was really trying to steer us far away from showing the form of those kinds of beings by making it a symbolic shape. And that's why you have the monolith. So I think he didn't want to alienate people by being too precise about this is what they look like. It's not, it's, I don't even think he means to describe it, whether it's a they or an it or, like I said, just God. I think he was saying, I think that it isn't all accidental, natural selection like Darwin. I think it's more like intelligent design that every molecule, atom, subatomic particle is all part of intelligent design. There you can go to the next step of saying, okay, maybe are we even living in a simulation? Is all this a creation of a higher intelligence that we're operating on what's like a stage of a theater, and we're all just thinking that this is what reality really is because this is what our senses tell us, but maybe it's not real. There's all kinds of theories on this right now that are going on where people are
Yeah.
speculating that we only see a fraction of the real existence, that our consciousness is only partially in this perceivable universe, and that the rest of our consciousness is actually somewhere else.
Mhm.
And we don't really fully experience it until we die about what our full consciousness is as a part of the greater whole. People talk about whether or not we actually are all consciously connected. People talk about when you see animals that move in flocks and they seem to move simultaneously. Apparently, there have been studies that show that actually they do. I will tell you one of the most spiritual experiences I've ever had. I've talked about one about my mom's death and my malfunctioning cell phone, coincidence or not. Another one of the ones that I had to do with animals. I was walking my dog in Indiana before I moved out here, and there were some deer that were about 100 yards away and they were grazing and they saw me and the dog and they all turned to look at me at the same time. They all started running at the same time. And just as synchronous, they all stopped and turned and looked at us for several seconds without any hesitation or lapse of time to have it be like they saw each other doing it. So they just did it together. It was almost like they were consciously connected.
Interesting.
And in that moment, I contemplated the same thing that these scientists are talking about in their studies is that connection there? And do we have it sometimes? Do we get gut feelings about what other people feel or think? Maybe not fully knowing, but yet somehow grasping it. If we are in large groups of people together, whether we're worshiping at a concert, in a movie theater, having the same reactions, are we somehow connecting some way that we don't perceive in our understanding of the universe? I think these are the kinds of things that this film invites. And he's doing it in a way that he doesn't want to create straw men and knockover for people to say, no, that's not it. Oh, you got aliens that are humanoid doing that. That's ridiculous. I hate that. That's stupid.
Mhm.
He's trying to be as vague as possible because he doesn't want to put his finger on it. And that's smart. Because if you want to make an argument, you create something that asks questions instead of trying to give answers. And 2001 puts those questions out there for people and they say, you now think about it and you decide.
Mhm.
So,
Agreed. It's, certainly open to interpretation and a brilliant film.
right. Okay. So the honorable mentions for sci fi are three James Cameron films for you: The Abyss, Aliens, T2. Aliens is on my honorable mention list. The Abyss is a film that was so important to me about what was not in the theatrical release that when they actually released the director's cut, I went out on my way to seek it out to make sure I got to see the missing minutes of the tidal wave sequence that was not in the theatrical release. And I was like, where the hell's the tidal wave at? So go ahead, talk about those three.
So my honorable mentions in the sci-fi category are 3 James Cameron films. We have The Abyss from '89, technically an extraordinary feat, known as a very troubled production, though. They actually used an abandoned nuclear power plant in, I believe it was South Carolina, and all the actors had to be trained in scuba diving, and there was a lot of underwater photography involved. Mike had touched on the extended cut, the director's cut that the studio didn't allow because it extended the length of the film too long. But here at the end of the film, we've got
Actually, the
our
effects weren't done.
was that what it was? No
Yeah,
kidding. I thought the studio had pressured it.
he felt that the tidal wave was not working visually, and he fell on his sword and said, I got to make sure the studio gets their money back. They have to hit this summer release date. We're going to release it unfinished. And we're talking about the climax of the movie.
Yeah.
Again, having read the novelization, I was really upset when I saw it. Like, what
My
are you
gosh.
doing? This doesn't have the entire point of what happens there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What the NTIs could hold over us literally, to get us to change our ways.
right.
So that takes quite a bit of the umph out of the ending, doesn't it?
It did. Yeah, I felt that way, which is why, again, I went out and sought out this film just so I could see it the way it was supposed to be when he finally finished it like a year later and they had this very minimal release of the director's cut.
Yeah. Then we'll jump to Aliens, 1986 James Cameron film, follow up to Ridley Scott's Alien. Um, Shot in England. Cameron's experience was unique in that the English crew didn't really care for this American coming over to bark orders at him and cause some friction. It's a great follow up. It's a different approach. We've got war against aliens this time, as opposed to humans being stalked by aliens, is what we saw in the first film. But terrific visual effects, including Stan Winston and his team doing the aliens, including the Alien Queen. Just a lot of fun, a fun ride. And what comes to mind about it at your end?
Well, you're right. It's the action to Ridley's horror film. So, a lot of people who prefer action films to more of a slow burn tension factory, they prefer this film. But to me, it's just a different approach. It doesn't, to me, fulfill the goal as much as the first film. But I really like this film. It did make the Ripley character an action hero, interesting female icon action hero, Oscar nominated as well. So, I mean, this is an all around complete character that was very acknowledged within the culture at the time. And with that, Alien then became a franchise. So yeah, he did it did full justice to Ridley Scott's creation, and this is the way sequels probably should be done, where you augment the mythology. He created the queen idea. The mother versus mother final battle is interesting thematically, where they're fighting over their offspring in a sense. So, yeah, I mean, it's a thrill a minute, and it was something I was greatly looking forward to. It actually met my expectations, slightly even exceeded them probably. So I was pretty fascinated with this film when it came out.
Yeah, for me, it's one of the best sequels out there. Like T2, like Empire Strikes Back. It gives us something different, yet enhances maybe what we saw the first time around. It's an incredible film, and technically a great achievement with all the effects they had to create for it. So the next sci-fi film on my runner-up list is James Cameron's 1991 Terminator 2: Judgment Day. I remember seeing this in the Cinerama Dome on Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood, and it just knocked my socks off. Just like we were talking about King Kong earlier, films come by where the techniques involved raise the bar, and the folks at ILM did so with this film with the T-1000, the liquid metal villain. There's some incredible shots in this film that were um, really state of the art at the time, and then in the decades since then, they've held up pretty well, I think, despite the fact that technology has advanced so much. This time around, instead of being the villain, Arnold Schwarzenegger's Terminator is the protector of John Connor, and great addition of Robert Patrick as the T-1000, who's I heard Cameron describe him as cat-like. He's just basically designed to hunt and kill, and that's really what he does. He's terrific in the film, and shot in and around LA, Southern California, and really amazing action sequences. Helicopter going on a bridge that James Cameron actually shot because the DP thought it was too risky. And so Cameron took care of that shot. And it definitely turned out a lot better than a lot of people maybe thought it would. But James Cameron's continued to prove himself and, never bet against James Cameron. So that's why it's on my list as runner up.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts about it?
Well, I mean, clearly with Terminator being in my top five, I prefer it story wise to Terminator 2. So as a writer, I have to prefer story wise. I mean, but obviously you can't hold a candle between Terminator's effects and Terminator 2's effects. I mean, Terminator 2 as a visual effects presentation is really remarkable. I mean, I think it was the most expensive film ever made when it came out.
100 million.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was the first one, I think, to go that high, and so, they were really testing the CGI with the T-1000, and Robert Patrick, I mean, you have to be credible being able to fight Arnold, and he was able to
Hmm.
do it, so in that regard, wow, what an accomplishment that they could pull all that off. So, I know they were trying to turn Arnold into the good guy because at that point, I guess they felt it was kinda irresponsible to have him going around just wasting cops and stuff. That was kind of not, something you want your heroes doing out there, so So they found a way to make him a good guy. I think it worked pretty well. I think some of the stuff between the boy John Connor as a lad, bit of an annoying young lad actually, and the Terminator doesn't always work tremendously, and the director's cut might actually make it even a little worse. But I mean, the scenes where Sarah is imagining Los Angeles being destroyed in a nuclear explosion and what drives her to do the kind of radical thing she's doing to kind of pull a dead zone and try to stop the future by killing the guy that's going to create Skynet. But I guess she makes the same choice that we were discussing earlier. You can't just kill the guy who hasn't done something yet, especially when he's saying that he's going to change his mind and not do it anymore. So give him some credit, right? So that's an interesting theme. The way the film ends with the future is unwritten, for all of us, the future is unwritten. We can always choose where to go. So it's got a great thematic message too. Yeah, I just have to give the perfect structure of the first film a little bit more credit.
So going from T2 to my next runner up in sci-fi category is Steven Spielberg's 1977 Close Encounters of the Third Kind, his
You like
follow-up
this
film to
guy, Steven
Jaws.
Spielberg.
Yeah, there's something about this guy. I think he's going to make him something of himself one day. But Close Encounters, Spielberg wrote the script. My understanding is he, sort of like a lot of us, is fascinated by the what if possibilities. So Jaws was such a success that he basically had an e-ticket to do what he wanted, and this is what he decided to do. Incredibly ambitious science fiction film about aliens visiting Earth and making contact with us. And Richard Dreyfuss plays the lead. Really terrific role. And actually, from a psychological standpoint, we see his character go through madness because he's seeing this vision of the Devil's Tower in his mind, and he's sculpting it at home. Everybody thinks he's nuts. Wife thinks he's nuts. Kids thinks he's nuts. He even, I think, begins to think he's nuts. But then, in the third act of the film, we realize that he's drawn, like other people, to Devil's Tower because that's where the aliens choose to reveal themselves. And luckily enough, Roy is one of the people that, or maybe the only person at that point, they decide to take with him. It's an amazing film visually. The cinematography is great. The visual effects are great. Douglas Trumbull was one of the primary leads in crafting the visual effects, and even to this day, they hold up. And I think a lot of us are curious to see where Spielberg's going to go with his new film, Disclosure Day. And interestingly, one of the shots in the trailer we've seen for that are very close encounters ish, where we see a UFO coming out of fog or clouds. And it's very reminiscent of what we saw in Close Encounters. What are your thoughts about it?
Yeah, I mean, I like this film a lot. I like the plot and how it addresses his character being so fascinated by the phenomena that he leaves his family to go figure it out and decides to eventually just go off world to understand these beings. I understand that Spielberg has second guessed himself in later lives when he had a family. That He's like, I would never do that now, but it made sense at the time. I had that kind of fascination with it. So yeah, I mean, this is the writer of Spielberg putting himself. I always kind of see Richard Dreyfuss as kind of like his surrogate anyway. He just seems so much like him in some ways, and especially in the '70s films. So yeah, I mean, there's something perfect about the effects that make you feel like, wow, this is really the real UFO thing. If UFOs are real, then they have to be kind of like this because there's just some kind of cinema, cinematographic magic in how they're captured that is totally sold on the viewer. So yeah, there's the structure of that movie. There's certain elements that come through at key times, like when they're all doing this song in India, they're all chanting it the
Mm,
same tune
mhm.
over and over again. And
They
the
all point
opening,
to the sky.
yeah, pointing to the sky, and then the opening with the planes that were missing from the Bermuda Triangle, and all those things that when we were raised, we heard a lot about these mysterious stories that are true from history, and we're like, oh, what does all that mean? And he's tying a lot of those things that we've all heard about when we were growing up together into this story, and makes it feel even more credible. So yeah, he really sells it, and yeah, it's a fascinating movie that I think adults can probably get into even more than kids. The kids might, marvel at all the effects, but I think it's a little bit more adult in its subject matter that they don't really get some of that when they're younger. I tried to show my older kids that when they were small and they didn't really grab onto it so much. And they're like, we were too young when you took us. And I'm like, I was only 5 or 6 when I saw it. So, but oh well, maybe now it just isn't the same. with all the things they get to see in effects these days.
Very good. What's next on your list?
All right, so my two sci-fi. Kind of surprised I didn't put Arrival on here because I just watched that movie again recently, and that one killed
Mm,
me. But
great film.
when I was making this list, I guess um, Dune 2 is kind of more on my mind because my younger self that really still liked Dune, even though it was kind of off kilter at times. There's still some beautiful stuff in Lynch's film, but Villeneuve, I thought, did fine in volume one of the Dune two-part exploration, but there were some things I kind of missed in Lynch's version that weren't in it. So I was like, I like it, but I'm not sure it's so substantially better. But Dune 2, I think he got everything right. So I was finally getting the full thing that I had imagined in my mind when I read Dune when I was younger, years and years ago. And there's some really powerful themes that come through as well. I'm not even sure I caught all of them in the way that I should have when I was younger. I probably didn't pick them up because I was too young to pick up some of the more adult aspects. But the idea of using the Kwisatz Haderach, which is Paul's Bene Gesserit title for what he is, which is basically a male witch instead of the female witches that make up the Bene Gesserit. He's able to see things that they can't see in the future. He can create a way that will guide humanity. And the fact that they're using religion and the same equivalent of that with the Fremen, the higher being that will become like their messiah to control them. And he uses that to influence them to make him like a leader to them and to then go out and fight a jihad, a holy war, which obviously Frank Herbert was using the Muslim term for holy war when he used jihad to conquer the galaxy. So those are interesting themes. I mean, he does have those kind of godlike capabilities, but he himself does not view himself as a god, but he's willing to play the role if he needs to fulfill his revenge for the death of his father, and if he actually does know the way for humanity to take them there. So there's obviously a lot of devastation involved because there's going to be lots of death and destruction in order to create that Pax Humana that's supposed to last for 10,000 years. And for those who've read this series, they kind of know that his plan doesn't just include himself, it includes his offspring who have the ability to carry on his mission. So it's a great stepping off point to whatever's going to end up being part three. And I honestly foresee that we're going to have within the next year, when Dune 3 comes out, we're going to have probably a dedicated episode to the Dune series to talk about all these elements and how they play out over their trilogy. Because there's still another step left in this story.
Absolutely. I love Denny's Dune 1, but I agree with you. I think Denny's Dune 2 is superior, and it's hard not to compare what Denis doing with these Dune films to epics like Lawrence of Arabia, with the photography and the use of the desert as a character and its role in the stories. And then there's the other aspect, which is, Paul Atreides, like T.E. Lawrence, there's people that criticize the characters as the white savior types. There's probably some validity to that. I don't really focus on it myself, but I
Well,
can understand if
the
some
film, though, acknowledges it and accepts that aspect because, in a sense, he is a false prophet. I mean, he does have this agenda that maybe will lead to the betterment of humankind, but he is using the savior messianic label to get this agenda done. So it addresses it.
true. Amazing films, and I'm excited about Dune 3.
Right. So my last sci-fi film brings me back to, and this is honorable mention, of course, again. And like Videodrome, this is for the adventuresome sort. Darren Aronofsky's first film, which debuted at Sundance and made a big splash. He won Best Director for it. Pi, which in many ways is a glorified student film, but the ideas it has are so much bigger. So Aronofsky was a very self-serious person, obviously, who he wrote, I understand, a speech about Noah, which I think he won a competition nationwide or something with this speech that he did. And of course, he made the film Noah eventually in his career. So he's got big things on his mind as far as themes that he wants to address. So Pi is really about a young, well, middle-aged guy, I guess, who is completely absorbed at trying to understand the nature of existence. And that's, it's probably the author of the screenplay talking a little bit about his own musings and putting it into his character. So specifically, this guy is trying to find a constant, a numerical constant that will be used to predict the stock market with perfect capability. And the idea is that this constant is not just a constant for the stock market, it's for all systems. And if you figure out the constant for all systems, then you understand how everything works. So he makes points about how you have the golden spiral that you find in nature. You find it on the smallest levels of biology, and you also find it in galaxies in the universe. So you have these mathematical principles that are pervasive everywhere. And so as he's trying to contemplate significant themes, the character is also falling apart physically. He's having these headaches. He's probably trying to stare too much into the sun, as he talks about in the movie. You know, when I was young, I used to stare into the sun. He's Icarus, flying too close to it. And at what point are his wings going to melt and he's just going to crash to Earth? So while he's making all these contemplations of existence, he's not living his life. There's a woman next door that kind of fancies him, that he doesn't engage with her. He's too busy trying to use his computer to figure out this constant. So the ultimate endpoint of the story is about that you shouldn't be doing that. You shouldn't be using your life just to figure out the nature of existence. You should be living your life. And yeah, you should try to tap into whatever's the deeper meaning of things, but you can't find all of it, because I guess if you found all of it, you would be dead. And that's really what the movie's trying to do. And he's doing this on a $60,000 budget. It's pretty brilliant that he's able to touch on all these things in such a small scale production. So I give this film special honorable mention, because for those of you who are adventuresome enough to go out there and find this movie, it might be more enlightening to you than you ever expect. All right, so we finally reached the last film on the list of the top 30. So my last film in the top 30 is, for the most part, considered one of the top 2 or 3 films of the last 25 years by critics, many movie insiders. It's considered a top 50 all time, constantly makes those types of lists. It's by David Lynch, who revolutionized TV with Twin Peaks, made a huge splash with the film Blue Velvet in the 80s, at a time when such films were really not the flavor of the month. He did get a Best Director nomination for that film despite its controversy. So, but probably his highest achievement is, and the pinnacle of his creative career, is Mulholland Drive. So it was a failed TV series that the network said, we're not going to make this a TV show. You can take the footage you've shot and do whatever you want with it. So he went and shot some more footage, made it a little bit more not for TV like in some of its content. It is a mind bender and a half. I'm not sure you can fully describe exactly what happens in this movie plot wise, but it's not really essential to do so, because you get the basic gist of it. It deals with, like Persona, sort of the breakdown of identity, and you're not sure in some ways whether the main character is multiple people that are moving through at different points in the story, or whether is she hallucinating this, is she having dreams, is she having a psychotic break. It's not really clear. I mean, you definitely know that she has a breakdown at some point in the story, because it just shows you that this is happening to her. But if you get into the story sense of what it's really about Hollywood. It's kind of like a film that's about the end of Hollywood. You have a bright young ingenue actress, Naomi Watts plays her, showing up in Los Angeles from the Midwest or wherever she's from. I can't recall, but you just saw it recently. Do you remember where she was from?
Honestly, don't. No.
Yeah. So she won like a talent contest. They show that at the very beginning, where she's, it's like this dance thing, almost like it's from the 50s. So she's obviously from a simpler place. She comes to Hollywood, and then she enters the dark world of Hollywood and celebrity, and trying to make her career as an actress. So there's an amazing scene midway of the film where she is at an audition, and she becomes a different person in the audition that is so clearly not the person that you see throughout most of the film, that you're like, wow, she is an amazing actress. And so Naomi Watts portrays this so well that, yes, Naomi Watts is an amazing actress. She's an Australian who seems like she's from the Midwest or whatever, and a simple girl coming to Hollywood, and then she can play this really intense scene with this older male actor. So yeah, it deals with then how these fluctuating identities exist for her. And by the time you get to the end, you realize that this process is destroying her persona. And there's a character that she meets up with early in the film that has amnesia, that is a foil for her in some ways, because as she's trying to make it as an actress, this woman who is a star, who then has amnesia and has forgotten who she is, she starts going back into being like a celebrity again, and Naomi Watts starts spiraling down while her friend is rising. And that's why when I see this film, I kind of wonder, whether this star is not really a real person. I begin to wonder if this is a creation that Naomi Watts' character has made that is achieving this stardom, but she's achieving it by not being who she is as a person. And I think Lynch has done this before in other films where he's commented on things that people are aware of in pop culture and he recharacterizes them. I think Lost Highway, for instance, is a film that's really about O.J. Simpson because it deals with a guy who thinks his wife is cheating on him and that she has this whole other life as some harlot and he kills her. And then you go through the second half of the movie where he's like a young, innocent man instead of the man who kills his wife. He's this young, innocent man who's then seduced by this femme fatale type character. And it's like two sides of the same coin, and there's a duality to it. I think Mulholland Drive is working similarly that this is like the Marilyn Monroe story where Norma Jean created Marilyn Monroe. Norma Jean doesn't become a star, but Marilyn Monroe becomes the star. And this is not who Norma Jean is. Marilyn Monroe, we all know, descended into drugs. She died way before her time, maybe killed herself. And I think Lynch had said that Mulholland Drive is based on an actress he knew that died. So who knows whether it's some person he just knew personally or whether it's Marilyn Monroe. I'm not sure. Lynch is pretty cryptic about describing what his films are really about. So I think that that's what this film is about. And in some ways, to me, this is kind of like the end point of where celluloid dreams die. At a certain point, celluloid dreams are just dreams, but another level, they are an expression by artists of what's important to them in their core and how much they can smuggle some of these things in. And whenever they can, and whenever they are able to bring that truth, their artistic truth to people in their films, they have succeeded at defeating the system, that soul crushing Hollywood system. And it is definitely soul crushing now for so many. I love it when a Denis Villeneuve or a Christopher Nolan can work within that system and somehow tame it and put these wonderful creations that have meaning and so many layers, and they don't even have to smuggle. They can just do it. So David Lynch himself was sort of crushed with his Dune experience, and he said he would never make another film where he didn't have final cut. So ever since then, he was able to live the art life and he lived his way. And I have such respect, even if you don't fancy what he's talking about in some of his films, they're just too weird for you. They're too controversial in subject matter. It doesn't really matter because, I mean, people that knew him say he's one of the nicest people you would ever know. So kind to his actors, so giving artistically. If you want to try something, he was for it. Best type of person to work with. He was not this harsh person that wanted to make this a terrible process. He wanted to make it a special process. He himself tried to get in touch with his own spiritual side through transcendentalism. So, I mean, people say, man, he's so dark. You know, he must be this really disturbed person. But in his day to day being, everybody says that he's like the most kind, good person. But yeah, he's willing to explore these really disturbing things. So I hope there is another artist like him. He's passed who can just go there to those places that most people are just too scared to look at inside our psychology and explore it. And even if you don't completely understand it, maybe he didn't even completely understand what he was getting into when he got that deep into the psychology of what he was exploring. But to me, I mean, that is the end point of where film goes. And I think so many other artists, so many other appreciators of film, even if they never created a film, they can see it. And this is why this is on poll after poll as one of the top movies of the last 25 years.
He would have been a really interesting guy to meet with and talk to, and after his passing, it was publicized that he often would go to the Bob's Big Boy, I believe, at Burbank, and have his usual meal, which was like a cheeseburger and a milkshake, and it would have been great to just walk in and see him there and talk to him a bit and engage in conversation, and I've heard the same about him from cast and crew, that he was a dream to work with and, a wonderful human being, and to elaborate on what you touched on with Mulholland Drive, I agree with your interpretation of the meaning behind the film. I also had read online somebody theorized that the first half of the movie is a dream, the second half of the movie is reality, and that could be too. But I think the way you explained it with the two female leads makes sense to me. You touched on the business of Hollywood. You know how there's a few directors like David and Christopher Nolan and Denis that can get their visions created in the way they want, but a lot of directors They get a paycheck and they have to sacrifice their vision sometimes to what the studio demands, whether it's aspects of the story or the length of the film, whatever. And we're in a state right now where so much business has moved out of Hollywood that, not only has it affected actors and directors and writers, but we got crew members, that have lost their livelihoods. And, you know, Hollywood isn't what it used to be, and it's kinda tragic in a way, and I don't know if it's ever gonna go back. I'm afraid that a lot of the actual filmmaking is gonna be in other countries and other states outside of Southern California.
Yeah. So many of the people that I came through with, I mean, they're not looking back. And This isn't to take away from any of the artisans that work on films because a lot of them they lose a lot. I mean, people that work in special effects, they don't make a lot of money. It's not glamorous at all. I mean, they do it because they love it. And for them, it's like, I'm so glad that you at least get to create in the way that you want to create, even if you're struggling in your day to day life because you're not really getting ahead. So I don't take
Yeah.
anything away from them. I still willing to acknowledge the artistry that a lot of people bring in their crafts, whatever they happen to be. It's just that ultimately a lot of the films that come out of it, it's just kind of hard for me to watch the big commercial cash grab that the corporate people are saying that they want to do. So when people talk about, look how popular the studio is in the industry. Look how well the studio did in the Emmys. People in
Mhm.
the industry, they know that a lot of it may be exaggerated truth, but it's truth of what a lot of people are thinking here. I mean, you're gonna have to do some heavy, heavy smuggling to make that work. So,
Well, the idea of art being created based on the results of focus group meetings, it's rather frightening, but there's no doubt it's happening, you know?
yeah, yep. So, on that note, folks, this comes to the end of this journey, and a new one will begin. So, for folks who want to understand the language of film and feel like that maybe they only have a faint grasp of it, we're going to do 5 episodes on hopefully five. I mean, based on this, we were only going to do a couple of these, and we ended up doing four, and one of them is obviously extremely long. So, we're going to do a quick film school going over various aspects of filmmaking. We'll refer back to these episodes as we go through from there on. We'll do explorations of individual films or groups of films, years when films came out, movements of films. We'll go through all that stuff later, but first we're going to just go through the basics so that you can feel like you understand what most people when they went through film school basically got out of it. The things that we remember from what we were introduced to and what we've learned since. And then you'll have the tools to try to decipher some of this stuff, especially when a filmmaker knows how to use those tools. So then you'll be able to pick it up, what they're doing. All right. So on that note, we're going to sign off for now and we'll see you next time.
See you next time, everybody.